They told her she was born broken. No wolf, no bond, no mate. At the sacred ceremony where every soul finds their destined other half, Lyra Thorn stood alone, laughed at, spat on, abandoned by her own blood. And then, in front of 1,000 witnesses, the most feared ruler in the known world stepped from the shadows and claimed her as his. But his touch held no warmth, only calculation. She was never chosen. She was used. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop the name of your city in the comments so I know you're watching. Let's begin. The moon hadn't risen yet, but the torches along the ceremonial grounds were already burning, and the smoke from them hung low over the valley like a warning nobody wanted to read out loud. Lyra Thorn sat on a wooden bench at the edge of the preparation tent, her hands folded so tight in her lap that her knuckles had gone the color of old bone. Somebody had braided her hair earlier that afternoon. Not her stepmother, not her half-sister, just one of the older serving women who still had the decency to feel sorry for her, and the braid was already coming loose on the left side. She didn't fix it. She hadn't looked in a mirror for 3 days. She wasn't sure she wanted to. Outside the tent, she could hear them, the pack. Laughing, shouting, the younger ones howling in that half-joking, half-nervous way they always did before a mating ceremony. The older ones grumbling about the cold and the price of mutton and whose daughter was expected to bond tonight and whose wasn't. The whole valley smelled like pine smoke and roasted meat and the sharp, clean snow coming down off the mountains, and underneath all of that, fainter but impossible to miss, if you knew what you were smelling for, was the iron and musk scent of 200 shifters in one place, every one of them alive in a way she had never been. Lyra. She looked up. Her father stood in the tent flap. Garrick Thorn, beta of the Ashford pack, though he carried himself like an alpha and always had. And the pack let him pretend because pretending was cheaper than correcting him. He was dressed in the dark green ceremonial coat, the one with the silver thread at the cuffs, and he had shaved for the occasion, which was the first time she'd seen him without stubble since her mother died. He looked at her the way a man looks at a crooked fence post he's been meaning to replace. "Stand up," he said. She stood. "Turn around." She turned. He made a small noise in his throat, not quite a sigh, not quite a grunt. Something in between, the sound of a man who has already made up his mind about how an evening is going to go and is just waiting for it to prove him right. "The dress fits," he said. "Good. Don't eat anything. Don't drink anything. Don't talk to anyone unless they talk to you first, and even then, keep it short. If anyone asks where your mother is, you say she passed and you leave it there. Do you hear me?" "I hear you." "Look at me when I'm talking to you." She looked at him. His eyes were the same pale gray as hers. That was the only thing she'd ever gotten from him that she was grateful for, and on nights like tonight, she wasn't even grateful for that. "Lyra." He stepped closer, lowered his voice. "You know what tonight is." "I know." "And you know what the matron said. When you were 12. You remember." "I remember." "Then you know what's likely to happen." She didn't answer. He took her chin between his thumb and forefinger, not hard, not gentle either, the way a horse trader lifts a mare's lip to check her teeth. "If the bond doesn't come, and it won't, we both know it won't, you will stand there. You will not cry. You will not run. You will not embarrass this family any more than you already have just by being alive. When they dismiss you, you will walk out the north gate with your head up, and you will keep walking until you hit the tree line. And then you will keep walking after that. Do you understand me?" She felt her throat close. "Do you understand me, girl?" "Yes." "Yes, what?" "Yes, Father." He let go of her chin, looked at her for one more second, and then quieter, almost to himself. "It would have been kinder if you'd just died with her." He walked out. The tent flap fell shut behind him, and the wind caught it and slapped it against the pole twice before it settled. And Lyra stood there in the middle of the dirt floor in her ceremonial white linen and her half-undone braid, and she did not cry, because she had used up all of her crying years ago on smaller things, and there was nothing left in her now but a kind of cold, tight silence, like the silence inside a bell right before someone strikes it. The ceremonial grounds of Ashford Pack sat in a natural bowl between two ridges, with a circle of flat stone at the center that had been worn smooth by 200 years of bare feet. Torches ringed the circle. Beyond the torches, benches. Beyond the benches, the whole pack, standing room only, in their finest. The elders on the west side in their gray robes. The warriors on the east in their leather. The unbonded, of which there were maybe 40 this year, in a nervous cluster by the north gate, dressed in white. Lyra stood among them. She was the oldest one there by 4 years. The girl next to her, Mira, 17, freckles, couldn't stop fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve, kept sneaking glances at her and then looking away, cheeks burning. Lyra didn't blame her. Being seen next to Lyra Thorn on the night of a mating ceremony was the kind of thing the gossips would remember for a decade. Across the circle, on the bench reserved for the Beta's family, Lyra's stepmother, Corinne, sat with her hands folded in her lap and her chin tilted up the way it always was. Beside her was Ivy, half-sister, 19, gold hair, the kind of face that made merchants lower their prices and made old men forget what they were saying mid-sentence. Ivy caught Lyra's eye across the fire, and her mouth curved into a little smile, and she lifted 2 fingers and gave the smallest possible wave, and Lyra felt her stomach turn over. Ivy had been telling people for a month that her destined mate was going to be Kellen Rourke, the Alpha's nephew. Lyra wasn't sure if that was true or if Ivy had just decided it was true and waited for the world to catch up. Ivy was good at that. The matron stepped into the circle. Old woman, thin as a reed, bare feet despite the snow. Her name was Hestia, and she'd been officiating these ceremonies since before Lyra's mother was born, and she had a way of looking at people that made you feel like she was reading the last page of your life before you'd even finished writing the first chapter. "Children of Ashford," she said, and her voice carried, the way old women's voices sometimes do, thin and clear and impossible to ignore. "Tonight the moon watches, tonight the blood remembers, tonight the thread pulls." The pack went quiet. Step forward when your name is called. Stand in the circle. Open yourself to the bond. If your mate is here, the wolf will know. If your mate is elsewhere, the wolf will tell you where to walk. And if... Here she paused, and her eyes, just for a second, skimmed across Lyra and moved on. If the wolf is silent, you will accept its silence with grace, and you will step aside, and you will trust that the thread has not yet been spun. Lyra's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the sides of her dress. "We begin," said Hestia. The first name was a boy Lyra didn't know well. He stepped into the circle, stood there for maybe 40 seconds, and then his head came up sharp, and he turned toward a girl on the east side of the grounds, and she was already walking toward him, and when they met in the middle of the circle, there was a sound. You couldn't describe it if you hadn't heard it. A soft, low hum, like a string being plucked in a room you couldn't see into. The bond. The pack cheered. The two of them stood there, foreheads pressed together, shaking, laughing, crying. Hestia gestured. They stepped out. Next name. It went like that for a long time. Some of them were quick. Some of them took a full minute of standing there, eyes closed, before the wolf spoke. A few walked out of the circle in the direction of their mate instead of toward them. Those were the ones whose destined wasn't in Ashford, who would ride out tomorrow with a pack escort to find them. 2 of them, a boy and a girl who'd grown up across the street from each other, stood in the circle looking at each other and started laughing. Because, of course, it had been each other all along. Lyra watched. She watched Kellen Rourke step into the circle. She watched Ivy stand up before he'd even closed his eyes. She watched him turn, slow, like a compass finding north, and look straight at her half-sister. And she watched Ivy walk across the dirt in her pale pink dress with that small, perfect smile on her face. And she watched the hum come up out of the fire like a living thing, and she watched the pack roar its approval. And she watched her father, Garrick, stand up from his seat on the Beta's bench and clap with tears in his eyes. And she watched her stepmother reach up and squeeze Ivy's hand as she passed. And she watched, and she watched, and she watched. She did not cry. Lyra Thorn. She stepped into the circle. The stone under her feet was cold even through the thin soles of her ceremonial slippers. The fire popped. Somewhere behind her, someone, a woman, older, let out a small, sharp laugh, the kind that gets stifled immediately by a hand over the mouth, but not fast enough. Hestia looked at her. "Close your eyes, child." Lyra closed her eyes. She had done this before, in her head, 1,000 times. Every night since she was 12 years old, and the matron had sat her down on the edge of her mother's bed, 6 weeks after her mother's funeral, and told her, in that same thin reed voice, "There is no wolf in you, Lyra. I have looked, and I have looked, and there is no wolf." She had practiced this moment. She had practiced the standing still. She had practiced the breathing. She had practiced the walking out, head up, the way her father had ordered. What she had not practiced was the silence, because when she closed her eyes and reached inward for the thing every shifter was supposed to find in moments like this, the hot, low rumble of their wolf, the animal that shared their skin, there was nothing. Not silence, exactly. Silence was too gentle a word. It was more like a room with no walls, a place where a thing should have been and wasn't and had never been, and the absence of it had a shape. And the shape was her. The fire popped again. Somebody coughed. Hestia's voice, very quiet, almost kind. "Reach, child." Lyra reached, and the nothing reached back. But there was something else under the nothing, underneath where the wolf should have been, where the wolf wasn't. Something else, something older. Not warm at all. Something that felt like standing at the mouth of a cave in winter and feeling the air coming up from inside the mountain, and knowing, without being told, that the air had been down there for a very, very long time, and it did not want to be disturbed. She flinched. Her eyes flew open. Hestia was staring at her, not with pity, not with disappointment, with something else. Something Lyra couldn't name and didn't have time to because Hestia's face smoothed over in the next half second, the way a pond smooths over after a stone drops in, and the old woman straightened and said, in the formal voice, the one she used for the ceremony, "The wolf is silent." The pack made a sound. It wasn't a gasp. A gasp would have been kinder. It was lower than that, and uglier. A kind of collective exhale, half disappointment and half satisfaction. The sound a crowd makes when something breaks and nobody's surprised it broke. "Step aside, child." Lyra stepped aside. She could hear them now. Not everyone, but enough. A man near the east benches, not bothering to lower his voice. "Told you. Told you last week." A woman somewhere to her left. Poor thing, her mother must be turning. And then, clearest of all, from the beta's bench, her father, not even whispering. "That's enough. I don't want to see her after tonight." She did not look at him. She made herself walk. The north gate was maybe 40 paces away. She counted them. Not in her head. Under her breath, barely moving her lips, the way her mother had taught her to count when she was small and scared of thunder. 1, 2, 3. At 15 paces, Ivy's voice cut through the murmurs, pitched just loud enough to carry, "Don't be too sad, sister. Maybe the wolves just have standards." Laughter. Not all of it, but enough of it. Lyra kept walking, 16, 17. At 20 paces, the laughter stopped. It didn't fade. It stopped. All at once. Like a door slamming shut on a room. Lyra took another step before her body understood that something had changed, and then her body stopped, and her mind caught up, and she turned her head, slow, because every head in the ceremonial grounds was turning slow toward the south ridge. A rider had come down off the ridge. No, not a rider. Riders, 6 of them. Black horses. Black cloaks. The one in front was bigger than the others, bigger than any man she'd ever seen in her life. And he rode without a helmet, with his dark hair loose around his shoulders. And even at that distance, 50, 60 paces, Lyra could feel the pressure of him, the way the air feels heavy before a summer storm, and she saw the elders on the west side of the grounds stand up one by one without saying a word, and she saw the matron Hestia drop to one knee, and she heard her father who had never bowed to anyone, not even the Alpha of Ashford, go down on both knees in the dirt. A voice behind Lyra, young, shaking, "Moon, save us, that's..." And another voice, older, flat with disbelief, "The Alpha King." Lyra's legs stopped working. She didn't fall. She just stopped. Stood there in the middle of the ceremonial grounds, halfway to the north gate, while 6 riders in black crossed the valley, and the entire Ashford pack went to its knees around her. And she couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't even be properly afraid, because fear required you to understand what was happening, and she didn't understand any of this. The rider stopped at the edge of the circle. The big one dismounted. The others didn't. He walked into the circle alone. Up close, he was worse. Or better. Lyra didn't know which word applied. He was maybe 30, maybe 35. It was hard to tell with alphas of his rank. Their faces went strange after a certain age. Too still, too unlined, like wood that had been oiled to the point of looking wet. His eyes were the color of wet slate. There was a scar, thin and old, that started just under his left ear and disappeared into the collar of his cloak. He wasn't armored. He didn't need to be. The air around him did the work of armor, thick and cold and wrong. He stopped 3 paces from Hestia. "Matron," he said. His voice was quiet. It didn't need to be loud. Quiet carried farther in a place like this. "My king," Hestia stayed on one knee. "You honor us. We were not told." "No, you weren't." He turned his head. He looked at Lyra. She had been looked at in her life, in a lot of different ways. Looked at with pity. Looked at with contempt. Looked at with the absent, offhand way a man looks at a dog that isn't his. This was none of those. This was the look of a man who had come a long way for a specific purpose and was now confirming that the thing he had come for was, in fact, the thing in front of him. It lasted maybe 4 seconds. It felt longer. "You," his voice again, still quiet, still carrying. "Your name." Her mouth was dry. "Lyra," she said. And then, because her body remembered its manners even when her mind didn't, "Lyra Thorn, my lord." "Step forward." She stepped forward. He watched her walk. She felt every step. The limp in her left ankle, from where Ivy had pushed her down the stone steps 4 years ago, and everyone had agreed it was an accident. The slight stoop in her shoulders, from sleeping in the kitchen loft because her father had given her room to Ivy. The loose strand of braid she hadn't fixed. She stopped in front of him. He was taller than her by almost a full head. He said, "You have no wolf." It wasn't a question. "No, my lord." "And no mate." "No, my lord." "Good." She looked up at him. He looked down at her. And then, loud enough for the entire pack to hear, loud enough for the voice to reach the back benches and the elders and her father on his knees in the dirt, he said, "Then I claim her, Lyra Thorn of Ashford, as mine." The sound the pack made this time was different. It wasn't disappointment. It wasn't satisfaction. It was the sound of 200 people trying, all at once, to understand a sentence that could not be understood, and failing and making a kind of collective breathless noise in the back of their throats while they failed. Lyra heard her stepmother say, very clearly, "What?" Hestia rose, slow, from her knee. "My king." The old woman's voice had a tremor in it Lyra had never heard before. "With respect. The girl has no wolf. She cannot. The bond cannot. It is not possible for her to be—" "I did not say she was my mate," said the king. He hadn't looked away from Lyra. "I said I claim her. Those are not the same word, matron." "My king, she will ride with me tonight. She will be brought to court. She will be announced." His head turned just slightly toward the beta's bench. "Her father will be compensated, generously, for his loss." From the dirt, Lyra's father said, "My king, she is—" "Thank you, my king, thank you. Be quiet, Garrick Thorn." Her father went quiet. The king's eyes came back to Lyra. And now, up close, in the torchlight, she could see it. What she hadn't been able to see from farther away. The thing behind his eyes. Not cruelty, exactly. Not warmth, not even a little. Something colder than cruelty, and more patient. The look of a man who had already decided a long time before tonight exactly how every part of this was going to go, and was now just walking through the steps. He held out one gloved hand. "Come, Lyra Thorn." She did not move. She didn't mean to disobey. Her body just didn't answer. She stood there with her arms at her sides and her half-undone braid over her shoulder, and she looked up at the most feared ruler in the known world, and some small, stupid part of her, the part that had spent the whole walk to the north gate counting paces under her breath, said very clearly, inside her own head, "He's lying. About something. I don't know what, but he's lying." Lyra. It was Hestia. Quiet. Close. The old woman had come up beside her without Lyra noticing. Child, take his hand. Lyra took his hand. His glove was soft, expensive. Under it, his hand was larger than hers and warmer than she'd expected, and she thought, distantly, that this was the first time in 5 years that another person had touched her without meaning to hurt her, and she did not know what to do with that information. He closed his hand around hers. Not tight, just closed. The way you close a door you intend to open again. We ride, he said. He turned. He walked her across the circle, past the bodies of the kneeling pack, past the elders with their gray robes and their shocked faces, past her stepmother with her mouth open, and past Ivy, who had gone, for once in her life, completely still, past the bench where her father was still on his knees in the dirt, with tears on his face that Lyra could not interpret, and she walked beside him because his hand was holding hers, and there was nothing else to do. And when they reached the horses, one of the riders dismounted and led a 7th horse forward, a smaller one, dark bay, already saddled, as if they had known, as if they had packed for her, as if every part of this had been prepared days or weeks before any of them had ever ridden into the valley. The king lifted her into the saddle. He did it easily, like lifting a child. Her feet left the ground, and then they were in the stirrups, and she was sitting on a horse she had never seen before in her life, in her white ceremonial dress, with a braid falling apart down her back. And the king of every pack from the sea to the mountains was mounting his own horse beside her, and the 6 riders were turning their horses toward the south ridge, and nobody in the ceremonial grounds of Ashford Pack was saying a single word. Hestia was looking up at her. The old woman's lips moved. No sound came out, but Lyra read them. Be careful, child. And then the horses turned, and the torches fell behind, and they were riding. They rode for a long time without speaking. The moon came up eventually, and the snow on the pass caught it and threw it back. And Lyra could see the shapes of the riders ahead of her and behind her, 4 of them front, 2 of them rear, all of them silent. The king rode beside her. He had not said a word since we ride. Sometimes she looked at him out of the corner of her eye and found that he was looking straight ahead, and sometimes she looked and found that he was already looking at her, and she didn't know which was worse. Around the 2nd hour, she couldn't stand it anymore. My lord. He didn't answer right away. She thought maybe he hadn't heard. Then, Ronan. I'm sorry? My name. When we are not in court, you will use it. Oh. She swallowed. Ronan. What do you want, Lyra Thorn? She had to gather the question. It had been sitting behind her teeth for 2 hours, but now that it was time to ask it, the words kept coming apart in her mouth. Why? He was quiet for a long moment. Why what? He said. Why me? You could have had anyone, any alpha's daughter, I don't even have a wolf. I'm not anyone. I'm nothing. Why? He looked at her. In the moonlight, his face was worse than it had been in the torchlight. Not because anything had changed, because nothing had. Because he could ride through the cold and the dark with a stranger at his side, a stranger he had claimed in front of 200 people, and his face could stay exactly the way it was, like the face of a man reading a ledger. Because, he said, you are convenient. Convenient? Yes. How? That, said the king, is a conversation for somewhere with walls. And he did not speak to her again until the palace gates came out of the dark. 3 hours later, black stone and iron, and the banners of a house she did not know, hanging stiff in the frozen air. The gates opened, they rode in, and Lyra Thorn, the rejected girl, the mateless daughter, the thing Garrick Thorn had been waiting half her life to be rid of, crossed the threshold of the royal palace of the Alpha King Ronan Varric in her stained white linen and her broken braid, and somewhere deep under her ribs, in the place where a wolf should have been and wasn't, the cold old thing that she had felt for the first time on the ceremonial stone, the thing that was not a wolf, that was older than a wolf, that was not warm and had never been warm, opened one eye in the dark and began, very quietly, to wake up. The palace of Veilcrest swallowed her the way a cathedral swallows a candle. They rode through the outer gate and into a courtyard that was bigger than the entire ceremonial grounds of Ashford, cobbled in black stone that had been polished by 2 centuries of boot leather until it threw the torchlight back like water. Lyra's horse stopped when the king's horse stopped. Somebody, a groom, a boy maybe 12 years old with a jaw set too hard for his age, came forward to take the reins, and he didn't look at her, didn't even glance. He kept his eyes on the horse's bit, and he led the animal away. And Lyra sat there in the empty saddle for a second before she realized she was supposed to have dismounted already. She tried. Her knees buckled halfway down. A gloved hand caught her under the elbow. "Don't," said the king very quietly in her ear. "Don't let them see that." He set her on her feet, steadied her for exactly as long as it took her legs to remember they were legs, and then he let go, and the warmth of his hand was gone, and the cold of the courtyard rushed in to fill the place where it had been. "Walk beside me," he said, "not behind. Beside. If you lag, they'll eat you before we reach the stairs." "Who will?" "All of them." She looked up. The inner gate had opened, and the staff was lined up on either side of a long strip of red carpet that ran from the gate to the palace steps, and there were maybe 40 of them, men and women in dark livery. Their faces turned downward, but their eyes, she could feel them, sliding sideways as she passed, reading her, pricing her, deciding. And past the staff, at the foot of the wide stone steps, stood 3 people who were clearly not staff, 2 men and a woman. All 3 of them in the kind of fur-collared coats that cost more than a house. All 3 of them wearing expressions that had been composed very carefully, the way you compose a face for a funeral you don't actually feel sorry about. "The council," said the king, barely moving his mouth. "Smile at them." "I can't." "Then don't smile. But don't flinch." She didn't flinch. The tallest of the 3 was a man with silver hair and the kind of thin, clipped mustache that belonged on a portrait. His name she would learn later. Lord Petrov Kane. The second man was shorter, heavier, his face arranged into a look of welcome that his eyes had not agreed to. Lord Anselm Dre. The woman was maybe 50, dark hair threaded with gray, a long jaw, a mouth that did not appear to have smiled since childhood. Lady Vesa Morrow. These 3, the king would tell her later, controlled between them a third of the wealth of the kingdom, and perhaps a little more than half of its opinions. Petrov Kane stepped forward as the king and Lyra reached the bottom of the steps. "Your Majesty." A small bow, silver hair falling forward, swept back with one hand. "We had not been informed of an arrival tonight, or a—" His eyes, pale blue, flickered once over Lyra's face. Her hair, her stained white linen, guessed. "No," said the king, "you had not. Might we ask—" "You might not." Silence. Kane's mouth tightened a fraction. Dre shifted his weight. Lady Morrow did not move at all. "Lord Kane," said the king. "Lord Dre, Lady Morrow. This is Lyra Thorn, of Ashford Pack. She is, as of approximately 4 hours ago, my chosen companion and the future consort of this throne. The formal announcement will be made in the morning. Tonight she will be shown to rooms. You will not question her. You will not send servants to her. You will not speak to her staff. Is that clear?" "Your Majesty," Dre started. "Is that clear, Anselm?" Dre closed his mouth. "It is clear, Your Majesty," said Lady Morrow, and her voice was dry as old paper. She inclined her head half an inch. "We live to serve." "You live," said the king, "because I have not yet given the order otherwise. Good night, Vesa." He walked up the steps. Lyra walked beside him. Behind them, she felt 3 pairs of eyes on her back, and if looks were teeth, she would have been bleeding from the shoulder blades before they reached the top. Inside the palace, the cold did not stop. The halls were tall and vaulted, and the stone kept the chill the way stone does, and even the great iron braziers, burning at intervals, couldn't quite beat the air into submission. They passed through a receiving hall, and a gallery lined with portraits of dead kings whose faces all bore a certain cruel patience around the eyes, and then up a staircase wide enough for 6 horses abreast, and then down another corridor and another. And by the time the king stopped in front of a door of carved black wood, Lyra had lost any sense of where in the building they were. "These are yours," he said. "My what?" "Your rooms, for now." He pushed the door open. It was a suite. 3 rooms that she could see from the threshold. A sitting room with a fire already lit, a bedchamber beyond it, and a door on the left that she would later find led to a bathing room with its own stove. The furniture was old and heavy and beautiful in the way old, heavy things are beautiful, without trying to be. On the bed, already laid out, was a nightdress of cream-colored silk. On a small table by the fire, a pitcher of water and a covered dish. You haven't eaten, said the king. No. Eat, sleep. Do not open the door for anyone. If someone knocks and says they are bringing you something, do not let them in. If they say they are from me, do not let them in. I will come for you in the morning myself. What if it's an emergency? Then it will still be an emergency in the morning, and you will still be alive. Lyra. She looked at him. He had not taken off his cloak. He was standing in the doorway with one hand on the frame and the other at his side, and for the first time since the ceremonial grounds, she could see that he was tired. Not the way a man gets tired from riding. The way a man gets tired from carrying something for a very long time without setting it down. I told you in the mountains, he said, that I would explain. I will. Tomorrow. You have my word. But tonight, I need you alive, and I need you quiet, and I need you behind this door. Can you do that? She was going to say yes. She was going to nod and close the door and eat whatever was under the lid and lie down in the silk nightdress and cry for 4 hours the way she hadn't allowed herself to cry on the ceremonial grounds. And in the morning, she was going to do whatever he told her to do. That is what she was going to say. What came out of her mouth instead was, "Why did you pick me?" He didn't answer right away. "Not the ceremony answer," she said, the real one. "I told you. You were convenient." "You told me I was convenient. You didn't tell me why." His jaw tightened, just a little. A very small muscle, high on the cheek, under the scar. "Because you have no wolf," he said, "and therefore no bond, and therefore you cannot be used by my enemies to form one against me through proxy. Because your father will take money and be quiet. Because your pack was humiliated tonight, and a humiliated pack will not make trouble. Because the matron of Ashford is old and will not live long enough to make trouble either. Because the council expects me to marry a woman of standing, and you have none, and so my refusal to marry a woman of standing becomes, for them, a puzzle. And while they are solving that puzzle, they are not solving other ones. That is the real answer, Lyra Thorn. You are useful to me because you are," he hesitated, "because you are nothing that anyone wants, which makes you, for the next 3 months, something I can use." 3 months. That is how long I need the arrangement to hold. And after 3 months, he looked at her for a long, steady beat. "After 3 months," he said, "we will have another conversation." He closed the door. She stood there in the middle of the sitting room, in a dress that still had Ashford dirt on the hem, and she listened to his boots in the corridor, and she listened to them stop, and she listened to him say something very quiet to a guard she hadn't known was there, and she listened to his boots start again and move away. And when she couldn't hear them anymore, she walked slow to the table by the fire, and she lifted the lid off the covered dish, and it was bread and cold roast chicken and a little bowl of honey, and she stood there looking at it, and she put the lid back down. And she did not cry, and she did not eat, and she sat on the rug in front of the fire in her ceremonial dress, and she stared into the flames, and she counted. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 1,000. When she got to 1,000, she started over. She was on her third pass through the count, somewhere around 400, when she felt it again. The cold thing. The thing that was not a wolf. It was not loud. It was not a voice. It was barely anything. More like a shift in the air pressure inside her own chest, a small, slow inhale that didn't match her breathing. But it was there. It had been there since the ceremonial stone. And now, alone in a room that was not hers, in a palace that was not hers, in a country where the only person who knew her name had just locked her in and walked away, the thing under her ribs did something it had not done before. It listened, not to her, to the palace, to the hallways beyond the door, to the stones in the walls, to the corridor 3 floors below, where, somewhere, a man was murmuring to another man, and the murmur had the rhythm of a plan being made. She couldn't hear the words. She didn't need to. She could feel the shape of them, urgent, low. A word that she somehow knew, without hearing, was her. She went very still on the rug. The thing under her ribs went still with her. And after a long moment, it closed its eye again, and the air pressure evened out, and the fire popped, and she was alone with herself again, kneeling on a rug in a room she didn't own. And for the first time in a very long time, Lyra Thorn was not afraid because she was helpless. She was afraid because she wasn't. She slept eventually on the rug. She didn't remember deciding to. She remembered the fire burning down to embers, and then she remembered a gray light coming in through a window she hadn't noticed the night before, and a soft, insistent tapping on the door. She sat up fast. Her neck cracked. Her mouth tasted like iron. "Lyra Thorn," a woman's voice. Older, not unkind. "His Majesty sent me." He said not to open the door for anyone who claimed to come from him. He did not say not to open the door for me. "My name is Halwyn. I am the housekeeper. His Majesty will be at your door in 1 hour, and he would prefer that you not greet him in yesterday's dress. May I come in?" Lyra got up off the rug. Her knees protested. She went to the door. She hesitated with her hand on the latch, and then, because she didn't know what else to do, she opened it. Halwyn was in her 60s. Short, broad, iron-gray hair pulled back into a bun so tight it looked painful. She had flour on one sleeve and a set of keys at her belt, and she looked at Lyra the way a farmer looks at a calf that has gotten loose, practical, unsurprised, and with a kind of professional affection that did not require liking the calf. "You haven't eaten," she said, glancing at the covered dish. "No." "You haven't slept." "Not in a bed." "Right." Halwyn nodded once, as though a suspicion had been confirmed. "Into the bathing room. The water is already warm. There's a fresh dress laid out. Gray wool, nothing fancy, nothing that will get you killed before breakfast. You have 35 minutes. I will bring bread and tea. If you faint during the council presentation, I will personally carry you out by the ankles, and I would rather not. Move." Lyra moved. Later, clean, warmer, in a gray wool dress that fit surprisingly well, and a pair of leather slippers that didn't, she sat on the edge of the bed with her hair damp on her shoulders and watched Halwyn pour tea into a cup made of something so thin Lyra could see the liquid through the porcelain. "Halwyn. What am I walking into?" Halwyn looked at her. It was the first time anyone had looked at Lyra since she'd left Ashford, with something that was close to sympathy. Close, but not quite. There was something harder underneath it. "You are walking," said Halwyn, "into a room full of people who, yesterday, went to bed believing that our king was going to marry the eldest daughter of Lord Kane. This morning they woke up and learned he did not. They will spend today figuring out why. Some of them will decide it is your fault. Some of them will decide it is his. The smart ones will decide it is neither. And those are the ones you should worry about most, because the smart ones will not be angry. They will be patient. Do you understand me, girl?" "I think so." "Don't think. No." Halwyn set the cup down in front of her. "One more thing. His Majesty does not explain himself to people. Not to me, not to the council, not from what I have seen, to you. Do not expect that to change, but watch what he does. What a man does tells you everything his mouth won't. Drink your tea." Lyra drank her tea. Halwyn stood back and looked her over, top to bottom, the way a tailor looks at a finished piece. "Better. You still look like you haven't slept, but better. Come." The king was waiting in the sitting room. He had not apparently slept either. He was in a dark coat, plain, without ornament, and there were fine lines at the corners of his eyes that hadn't been there in the torchlight. When he saw her, he didn't smile. He did, however, stand up, which she gathered, from the small approving nod Halwyn gave behind his back, was a thing he didn't do for just anyone. "The council is assembled," he said. "You will sit to my right. You will not speak unless I ask you to speak. If you are addressed directly, you will answer with your name and your pack of origin and nothing more. Do you understand?" "Yes." "If anyone offers you food or drink during the session, you will not accept it." "Understood." "If anyone touches you," his eyes sharpened, "you will step back, and you will look at me, and you will let me handle it." "Is that likely?" "It is a test they may try." "What happens if I fail it?" "You won't. But if I do—" He was quiet for a beat. "Then I will deal with the consequences," he said, "and you will not be touched a second time." They walked. The corridors of Vale Crest were busier in the morning. Servants carrying trays, pages running messages. A pair of guards standing at every intersection, in black with silver piping, eyes forward. Lyra noticed that every single guard, every single one of them, went slightly straighter when the king passed, and then, After he passed, glanced, just once, at her, reading her, filing her away. They stopped outside a pair of doors of dark wood banded in iron. "Breathe," said the king. She breathed. "Again." She breathed again. "Lyra." She looked up at him. "Whatever they say to you in there," he said, "remember that it is not you they are speaking to. It is the idea of you. The idea is small. The idea is what they want to destroy. You are larger than the idea. Do you understand me?" "I don't know." "That's a good answer. Go in." The doors opened. The council chamber was a long room with a long table of black oak, and it was already full. 12 people seated. 3 of them Lyra recognized from the night before: Kane, Dre, Morrow. The other 9 were strangers. Men and women, mostly older, though there were 2 who were younger than the king, one on each side of the table, and those 2 watched her the hardest. At the far end of the table sat a high-backed chair, and beside it another, slightly lower, with a footstool. The footstool was small and faintly insulting, and Lyra understood immediately that it had been put there on purpose. She walked to the lower chair. She did not sit on the footstool. She moved the footstool aside with one foot, a small, deliberate push, and she sat in the chair itself and put her feet flat on the floor, and she placed her hands, one over the other, in her lap, the way her mother had taught her to sit at the Ashford High table when she was 6 years old and did not yet know that her mother was going to die before her 9th birthday. Nobody said anything for a second. Then Lord Kane from the far end of the table said, "Well." "Good morning, Petrov," said the king, taking his own seat. "Your Majesty, and Miss Thorn, a pleasure, again." "Good morning, my lord. I trust you slept well." "I slept." A small ripple around the table. A couple of the younger ones, the ones on either side, well, one of them actually smiled, a quick flash of teeth. She filed the smile away. "To business," said the king. "Lord Dre, the border reports." And just like that, for 40 minutes, they ignored her. They talked about a grain shortage in the eastern provinces. They talked about a boy who had been found dead on the North Road with his throat torn out in a way that was not consistent with wolves. They talked about a trade dispute with a kingdom whose name Lyra didn't know. The king listened. Sometimes he asked a question. Sometimes he gave an order, short, clipped, the way he had given her orders. Lyra sat with her hands in her lap, and she watched. She watched Lord Kane most of all, because Lord Kane, while he reported on the grain shortage and nodded along to the trade dispute, kept his eyes, in small glances, on her face, on her hands, on the empty space beside her where the footstool had been. And every time his eyes came back to the king, there was a calculation behind them that was not being calculated anywhere else in the room. At the end of the 40 minutes, when the last of the border reports had been laid down, Kane cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, before we close, a matter of housekeeping." "The formal announcement of Miss Thorn's position. You said last night it would be made this morning." "I did." "And forgive me, Your Majesty, I ask only for the sake of the record. On what grounds?" "The people will, of course, want to know. A consort is a matter of state, not preference. Miss Thorn is, from what little we know, a girl of a minor pack. No title, no wolf, no—" "Are you asking me to justify my choice, Petrov?" "I am asking for clarity, for the record. The record will say what I tell it to say. You know this. Your Majesty, Petrov." The king's voice did not rise. It didn't need to. It went very slightly cooler, and the whole room cooled with it. "If you're going to ask me whether I intend to justify myself to this council for the choice of my own companion, the answer is no. If you're going to ask me whether I intend to justify it to the people, the answer is also no, because I am the king and justification is not a thing I owe. If you are going to ask me whether I expect you to support the announcement, the answer is yes. Which part of that is unclear to you?" "Sorry." Kane smiled. It was a small smile, polite, and it did not reach his eyes at all. "None of it, Your Majesty. I merely, on behalf of the council, wish to extend a gesture of welcome to Miss Thorn, since we had no opportunity last night." "Go on, Miss Thorn." Kane turned toward her. His voice went gentler, fatherly almost, and Lyra felt every hair on the back of her neck come up at once. "Permit an old man a kindness. Would you do me the honor of taking a cup of tea with me after this session concludes? Just the two of us in my private study. A welcome, nothing more. You've had a long journey, and I think I could set your mind at ease on certain matters that I suspect His Majesty has not had time to explain." The room went very still. Lyra felt the king, beside her, not move. That was the thing she felt most clearly. The way he did not turn his head, did not look at her, did not tense. He had told her about the test. He was letting the test happen. She looked at Lord Kane. Her heart was hammering, her mouth was dry. And somewhere in the back of her mind, the cold thing, the not a wolf, opened its eye again, and she could feel this in a way she had no words for, leaned forward. "Lord Kane," she said. "Miss Thorn." "My name is Lyra Thorn of Ashford Pack." "Yes?" "You asked me to take tea with you." "I did. I'm going to decline." Someone at the table, one of the older women, inhaled sharply. "Oh?" Kane's smile didn't move. "Yes." "May I ask why, my dear?" "Because I don't know you," Lyra said. Her voice was steady. It surprised her. "And I don't know the servants in your study. And I don't know what would be in the tea. And I was warned, before I came in here, that you might try a test of some kind. And I'd rather fail the first test in the room in front of everyone than pass a second test in a room alone with you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm sorry." A long silence. Then from the far end of the table, a sound that was very nearly a laugh. It came from the younger man on the left side, the one who had almost smiled earlier. He turned it into a cough, but he wasn't fast enough, and two other council members shot him such venomous looks that he sank noticeably into his chair. Kane's smile, finally, broke. It didn't vanish. It just stopped, went flat, the way a mask goes flat when the face behind it stops pretending. And for half a second, Lyra saw what was underneath the silver hair and the fatherly voice. And what was underneath was a man who did not enjoy being told no by anyone, and who had just been told no by a packless girl in a gray wool dress in front of 11 witnesses. "I see," said Kane. "I hope I haven't offended you." "Not at all, Miss Thorn. Not at all. A woman who guards herself so carefully," his eyes slid sideways to the king, and came back, "Ako, is a woman well taught. I commend His Majesty's instruction." "He didn't teach me that." "No?" "No. I learned that somewhere else." "Ah." Kane inclined his head. "Forgive me. I assumed." "A lot of people assume, Lord Kane. It usually goes badly for them." The silence after that was not the same silence as before. The king stood. "This council is adjourned," he said. "We reconvene on the 1st of next month. Good morning." Chairs scraped. The 12 stood. One by one, they bowed, and one by one, they filed out, and some of them glanced at Lyra on the way, and some of them did not. And Kane did not glance at her at all, which told her more than all the others combined. The last to go was the woman who had inhaled sharply, Lady Morrow, and she, as she passed behind Lyra's chair, slowed, just a fraction, and murmured so quietly that Lyra almost missed it, "Careful, girl," and she walked out. The door closed. It was just her and the king. He was still standing. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he did something she hadn't seen him do in the entire time she had known him, which was a total of about 15 hours. He laughed. It wasn't a big laugh. It wasn't the kind of laugh a man in a story is supposed to have. It was short and a little rough, like a cough, like a thing that had not been exercised in a long while, and he stopped it almost as soon as he had started, but it had been there. She had heard it. "You weren't supposed to answer him," he said. "You said not to speak unless asked." "I said not to speak unless I asked. Petrov Kane is not I." "I know." "Then why?" Lyra stood up carefully, because her legs had gone numb somewhere around the 20th minute of the border reports. "Because he was going to keep asking, and every time he asked and I didn't answer, it would be you refusing for me, and that would make me smaller in their eyes, not larger. You said last night, you said I was larger than the idea. I thought, if I'm supposed to be larger, I have to sound larger, at least once." He was quiet. "Sit down," he said. "Why?" "Because you're about to fall over." She sat down. He went to a sideboard by the wall and poured a glass of water from a pitcher that had, she noticed, been standing there untouched the entire session. He brought it to her. He watched her drink it. Lyra. Yes? What I told you last night. About the arrangement? About 3 months. That was true. All of it was true. But I need to tell you something else, and I need you to listen, and I need you not to ask me questions about it until tonight. All right? Cain is going to try to kill you. She set the glass down. When? I don't know. Soon. Not today. Today would be too obvious. Probably within the next 2 weeks. It will look like an accident. It will not be an accident. I will do what I can to prevent it. But the people I can trust in this palace, you can count on one hand, and 2 of those fingers are already sore. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Yes. Are you frightened? She thought about it. Yes, she said, but not the way I was last night. What's the difference? Last night I was frightened because I didn't know anything. Right now I'm frightened because I know a little. I think that's better. He looked at her for a long time. Halwyn will bring you to my study tonight, he said. After the house is asleep, we will speak properly. Until then, you do not leave your rooms except with me or with her. You do not eat food that does not come from her hand. You do not drink water that does not come from her hand. If someone pleasant and charming comes to your door and asks you a favor, the answer is no. Do you understand? Yes. Good. He turned toward the doors and stopped and turned halfway back. And Lyra. Yes. Don't move the footstool next time. I didn't like it. I know, neither did I. But they were watching for it, and you gave them exactly the moment they wanted. Pick your fight smaller until you understand the room. All right? Walk with me. I'll take you back. Halwyn brought her supper in her rooms. It was stew, hot, too much salt. Lyra ate all of it and drank the broth out of the bowl when the spoon stopped being useful, and Halwyn watched her eat with an expression that was somewhere between approval and worry. When Lyra had finished, Halwyn took the bowl away, and she paused at the door, and she said, without looking back, "What you did in the council this morning, word has already gone around. The kitchens were talking about it by noon. Is that bad? It is neither good nor bad. It is loud. Loud is dangerous in this house. But you are a loud thing in a loud house, and perhaps that is what this house needs. Sleep, if you can. I will come for you at the 11th bell." She left. Lyra did not sleep. She sat in the chair by the fire, in the gray wool dress, and she tried to make sense of the shape of the day. Cain's smile, Lady Morrow's murmur, the younger man who had nearly laughed, the footstool she shouldn't have moved, the cup of tea she shouldn't have refused in quite that way, the king who had laughed once quietly and stopped himself. And under all of it, the cold thing. It had been awake, off and on, since the council chamber, not loud, but watching. And once or twice, while Halwyn had been in the room, Lyra had felt it do something strange, a kind of tilt, toward Halwyn and then away, like a dog that smells something and decides it isn't a threat and settles again, not hostile, evaluating. She thought about her mother. She didn't mean to. She hadn't let herself in a long time. But her mother had said something once when Lyra was very small, 6, maybe 7, before the sickness. Her mother had been braiding her hair in the early morning, in the kitchen, and her mother had said out of nowhere, "If you ever feel something in you that doesn't feel like a wolf, Lyra, you listen to it. You listen to it carefully, and you don't tell your father. Do you hear me? Not your father. Not anyone. You listen, and you keep it quiet until you know what it is." Lyra had forgotten that. She had forgotten it for 11 years. She was staring into the fire and trying to figure out how she could have forgotten a thing like that when someone knocked on her door. 3 knocks. Soft. Rhythmic. Not Halwyn's knock. Not the 11th bell yet. It was maybe the 9th. She could hear the palace chimes through the window if she held her breath. And they had rung 9 not long ago. She didn't move. "Miss Thorn?" A woman's voice. Young, sweet, not a voice she knew. "Miss Thorn, I'm sorry to disturb you. Housekeeper Halwyn asked me to bring you a shawl. She said the corridor tonight will be cold and you don't have one." Lyra stood up. She walked quiet to the door. She did not unlatch it. She put her hand on the wood and felt it, the way she would feel a horse's flank to tell if it was sick. The cold thing under her ribs was up again, and it was no longer evaluating. It had gone tight and flat, and the air pressure in her chest had dropped in the way it drops before a storm breaks. "What is your name?" Lyra said through the door. "Molly, Miss Thorn, I work in the linens." "How long have you worked in the linens, Molly?" A pause. A pause that was just a beat too long. "4 years this winter, miss." "And who hired you?" "The housekeeper Halwyn, miss, of course." Lyra closed her eyes. If someone pleasant and charming comes to your door and asks you a favor, the answer is no. "Molly," she said, keeping her voice level, "I appreciate the shawl. Leave it outside the door, please. I'll collect it in a moment. I'm not dressed." Another pause. "Miss, it's just, the housekeeper asked me to put it around your shoulders myself. She was very particular. She said you might be tired." "I'm sure she did. Leave it outside, Molly. Thank you." A longer pause. Then, on the other side of the door, a small, soft sound. Not a sigh. Something quieter. A decision. And then the latch of Lyra's door moved. Somebody was turning it from the outside. She stepped back fast. The latch clicked up, then tried to drop, then caught on the inner bolt Halwyn had shown her how to throw that morning. It held. The handle jiggled, harder, then harder again, and the sweet voice on the other side was gone, and in its place was breathing, low and uneven, and a muttered word Lyra couldn't quite make out, but that was definitely not an apology. The door shook. Somebody threw a shoulder against it. It held. They threw a shoulder against it again. It held, but it wouldn't hold forever. The wood was old, the bolt was iron, and iron was only as strong as the wood it sat in. Lyra backed away from the door until her back hit the mantel of the fireplace, and the cold thing in her chest was not small anymore, was not quiet anymore. It was a roar. Not a sound. A pressure. A pressure inside her skull, behind her eyes, in the base of her throat. The fire in the hearth behind her did something strange. She felt it, more than saw it. The flames pulled for half a second, as though the air in the room had inhaled. The door shook a third time. Something in the frame cracked, and Lyra Thorn, who had no wolf, who had no mate, who had spent her entire life being told she was nothing, raised both her hands in front of her, palms out, toward the door, without deciding to, without knowing she was going to, because the cold thing in her chest had decided for her. And between her hands the air bent, the way air bends over a hot road in summer, and the temperature in the room dropped so fast that the condensation on the water pitcher froze in a single crackling instant, and the door stopped shaking. On the other side of the door, a woman who was not named Molly, who was not from the linens, who had not been hired by Halwyn, made a small sound that was not a word. And then boots, running, away. Silence. Lyra stood in front of the fireplace with her hands in front of her, shaking. Her breath came out white. The water in the pitcher had a thin skin of ice across the top, and a single delicate crack ran down the side of the porcelain where the ice had expanded against it. She lowered her hands. The cold thing, under her ribs, closed its eye. The fire came back. She was alone in the room. She was alone in the room, and she was not alone in the room. And she understood in that moment, with a clarity she had never had about anything in her life, that whatever was living inside her was not going back to sleep, and it was not a gift, and it was not a curse, and it was not anything the matron Hestia would have had a word for. And the king of Veilcrest had lied to her last night when he said he had picked her because she was nothing. He had picked her because someone, somewhere, had told him she wasn't. She walked, slow, to the door. She listened. The corridor beyond was quiet. She put her hand on the wood again. It was cold. Colder than a door should be. When she pulled her hand away, she left a faint, clear print of her palm on the surface, frost in the shape of her fingers, and as she watched, the frost melted and ran down the door in 5 small trails and was gone. Somewhere, far away in the palace, a bell began to ring. It was not the 11th bell. It was a different bell. Faster. Higher. An alarm bell. And underneath it, from the corridor outside her door, she heard for the first time that night the sound of boots running toward her rather than away. The boots stopped outside her door. "Miss Thorn," Halwyn's voice, sharper than it had been that morning, thin around the edges. "Open the bolt, quickly." Lyra didn't move. "Miss Thorn, it is me. I am alone. The guard at the end of the corridor is dead. Open the bolt now. Prove it." "What?" "Prove you're alone." A pause. Through the door, Lyra heard the housekeeper exhale in a way that was not quite a laugh, and not quite a curse. "This morning," said Halwyn, "I told you that if you fainted in the council, I would carry you out by the ankles. Open the door, girl." Lyra threw the bolt. Halwyn came in fast and shut the door behind her. She had her keys in one hand and a short knife in the other, a kitchen knife, the kind you use on rabbits, and there was blood on the front of her apron. Not much. A smear along the hip, dark, not hers. "The guard," said Lyra. "Dead, throat opened. They did it quiet. I found him when I came up." Halwyn's eyes moved across the room, fast, took in the frost melting off the door, the cracked water pitcher, the film of ice still sitting on top of the water. Her eyes did not widen. She saw it, and she filed it, and she went on. "Someone came to your door." "Yes." "A woman." "She said her name was Molly, from the linens." "There is no Molly in the linens. Where is she now?" "She ran." "Good. Put on your shoes." Lyra put on her shoes. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, which worried her more than the shaking had. She kept waiting for her body to fall apart the way it was supposed to after a thing like that, and it wasn't. It was just getting on with the shoes. Halwyn was already at the fireplace. She pushed the chair aside, crouched, and pressed the heel of her hand against a particular brick in the hearthstone. The brick shifted. Behind it, a narrow cavity. She fished out a thin iron key, pocketed it, pushed the brick back. "Halwyn?" "What's the bell?" "Fire in the east wing." Halwyn did not look at her. "Convenient timing. A distraction. A distraction. For what?" "For whatever comes next. Keep up." She opened the door a crack, looked, opened it the rest of the way, and they went into the corridor. The guard was lying maybe 15 paces down, on his side, one arm folded under him. His eyes were open. He had been a young man. Lyra saw the whole of him in the time it took to step around the blood, and she thought with a cold, practical clarity that did not feel like her own. He was not expecting it. Whoever did it, he knew them. He let them close. Halwyn took her by the elbow. "Don't look at him. Move!" They moved. The palace at night was a different animal than the palace by day. The halls were darker, the torches fewer, and the sound of the alarm bell came down through the vaulted stone in a way that turned each footstep into three. They passed a pair of running guards, and Halwyn pressed Lyra into an alcove until they were gone. They passed an open doorway where two maids stood clutching each other and staring toward the east wing, and neither maid noticed them. They passed a portrait of an old king with cruel, patient eyes, and Lyra had the unreasonable feeling that the portrait did. Halwyn turned left, then right, then left again, and stopped in front of a plain wooden door that looked like a broom cupboard. She fitted the iron key. The lock clicked. "In." Lyra went in. It wasn't a broom cupboard. It was a spiral staircase, narrow, stone, smelling of old dust and candle smoke. Halwyn came in behind her and shut the door and locked it from the inside. "Up," said Halwyn. They went up. 3 floors, maybe 4. Lyra lost count. The staircase opened onto another corridor, this one carpeted, the torches farther apart. At the end of it, a single door of black wood, and standing in front of it, not a guard but a man Lyra did not recognize. Tall, bald, a long scar across his scalp. He looked at Lyra without expression and stepped aside and opened the door for them without a word. "Thank you, Brannock," said Halwyn. "Ma'am." The door shut behind them. They were in a study. It was smaller than Lyra had expected. The walls were lined with books, most of them old, some of them so old that the spines had faded to the color of dry leaves. A fire burned low in a stone hearth. A heavy desk stood at the far end, under a single high window, and behind the desk, his face half in shadow, sat the king. He was not alone. On the other side of the desk, in a chair pulled close, sat a man Lyra had not seen before. He was old, older than Halwyn, older than the matron of Ashford. His hair was thin and white and stood out around his head the way thistledown does. He was wearing what looked like a sleeping robe and slippers, and on his lap was a leather satchel, and on the desk between him and the king was an open book, and in the margins of the book someone had drawn, in red ink, a symbol Lyra had never seen before and knew, with a small cold certainty, that she should have. The king looked up. "You're alive," he said. "Yes." "Good. Sit." She sat. Halwyn stayed standing by the door. Brannock, she assumed, was on the other side of it. "The woman who came to your door," said the king. "What did she say?" Lyra told him, all of it. The voice, the shawl, the latch, the shoulder against the wood. She did not tell him at first about her hands, about the frost, about the water pitcher. He watched her face while she talked. When she finished, he said, "You left something out." "Yes." "Tell me." She looked at the old man in the sleeping robe. "He can hear it," said the king. "He is the only other person in this building, apart from me and Halwyn, who can. Tell me." So she told him. The old man did not move while she spoke. He sat very still with his hands folded over the leather satchel and his pale eyes on her face. And when she got to the part about the water pitcher and the frost in the shape of her palm, his eyes closed for a long second, and he made a soft sound, almost a hum, not happy or sad, just a sound a person makes when a thing they have suspected for a long time turns out to be true. "Say that again, child," said the old man. His voice was cracked and warm, like the voice of a man who had spent too many years talking to himself. "The part about the fire." "What about the fire?" "You said the fire pulled, when you raised your hands." "Yes." The air moved, toward the door, away from the hearth. The flames bent. And then the cold. Then the cold. The water froze, not all the way, just a skin. And then it stopped. It stopped when the door stopped shaking. I didn't make it stop. It stopped by itself." "No, child," said the old man very softly. "It stopped because you did not feed it, and you did not feed it because in the moment you did not know how. That is good. That is very good." He turned his head toward the king. "Ronan, I know. She should not be in this palace. I know. She should be under the mountain, tonight. It's not possible tonight. Then every hour you keep her here, you are gambling with—" "I am aware, Theodore. I am aware of exactly what I am gambling with." The old man closed his eyes, opened them, looked at Lyra again. "Do you know what you are, girl?" "No." "Do you know what your mother was?" Lyra's breath stopped. "My mother. Your mother was Eleanor of Renholt, before she was Lyra Thorn of Ashford, before she married a beta who did not deserve her and did not know what he had, and who watched her fade over 8 years because she could not live in a valley where the stone was wrong for her, and who buried her without ever once asking why the stone had been wrong. Sit still, child. You look like you are about to stand up, and if you stand up, I am going to lose my place." Lyra did not stand up. She could not have. Her legs had gone. "My mother," she said again, and it came out thin. "Your mother," said the old man, "came from a line of women who were not wolves, and not witches, though the southern kingdoms sometimes called them that, because the southern kingdoms are simple and need a simple word. Your mother came from a line of women. There have been, at any given time, perhaps 3 of them living in the world, sometimes 4, rarely more, who are older than the wolves. The wolves are, I will not say young. The wolves are not young, but the thing your mother's line carried, the thing that is carrying now in you, was carrying in the mountains before the first wolf was ever born on this continent. Do you follow me?" "No." "Good. If you said yes, I would worry. The wolves came later. The wolves are a gift of the moon. Your line is a gift of the stone. Wolves run in packs and take warmth from each other and bond in pairs and love the light of the living. Your line does not pack, does not pair, does not warm. Your line listens to the rock under the earth and the air between the stars and the long, slow breath of the dark places that do not have names in any language that is still spoken. It is not evil, child. I want you to understand that. It is not evil. It is only very old and very cold, and it does not belong here, in rooms with fireplaces and silk nightdresses. Do you understand me now?" "No," said Lyra. Her voice was almost a whisper. "But I believe you." "That," said Theodore, "is better than understanding." "Ronan." "Yes." "Show her." The king opened a drawer of the desk. He took out a small object wrapped in black cloth. He unwrapped it and set it on the desk between them, and Lyra leaned forward, and then she did not breathe for a long time. It was a locket, her mother's locket. She had thought it had been buried with her. She had assumed it. She had never seen it after the funeral, and at the funeral there had been an argument. She remembered it. Her father shouting at Corinne about it, Corinne shouting back, and Lyra being very small and very quiet in a corner, and then the locket being gone, and nobody speaking of it again. It was not large, a silver oval, old, scratched, with a single dark stone set in the front that looked, in the firelight, like it was made of the same material as a night sky with no moon. "How?" she said. "Your father sold it," said the king, 3 months after your mother died, to a merchant who worked a route between Ashford and the eastern provinces. That merchant sold it the following year to a woman who sold it 8 years after that, to a man who sold it 2 years after that, to me. I have been looking for you, Lyra Thorn, since you were 13 years old. Since I was 13. Yes. I almost reached you when you were 15. I was delayed. I'm sorry about that. I had reason to believe you were dying. I was wrong, or you were stubborn, one of the two, probably both. Why? Why was I looking for you, or why did I not arrive in time? Why were you looking for me? The king and the old man looked at each other. Because, said the king slowly, there is a war coming. There has been a war coming since before I took the throne. It is not a war of armies, or not only. It is a war over what kind of thing is allowed to rule the packs. The council, some of them, believe the packs should be ruled by a council of bloodlines, of which theirs is the first. I do not agree. I believe the packs should be ruled by whoever is strong enough to hold them and wise enough to hold them well, and for the last 9 years, that has happened to be me. But I am one man, Lyra, and I am getting older, and I have enemies who are very patient. Theodore, for the last 30 years, has been an advisor to my father, and before that to my uncle, and before that to my uncle's father. He is the last of a very small order of men who remember what the histories actually say, and not what the current council prefers the histories to say. Theodore told me, the year I took the throne, that there was a girl alive somewhere in the northern packs who was the last of her line, that if I found her before the council did, I would have the only living thing in this continent that the council, for all their wealth and all their patience, could not buy and could not kill cleanly. He did not tell me what you were. He only told me to find you. And you found me. I found you 6 weeks ago. In a report, your pack's matron had filed a formal notice that you were to be declared mateless and removed from the ceremonial rolls on the next full moon. The name Lyra Thorn of Ashford did not mean anything to me, but the name Eleanor of Renholt did, because Theodore had been looking for any daughter of Eleanor for 30 years. And your mother was the last one alive of that name. And so you came. And so I came. To claim me. To save you, Lyra. Those are also not the same word. Those feel like the same word to me. I know. Silence. The old man cleared his throat. Ronan, we do not have all night. I am aware, Theodore. The child needs to know what is coming. Yes. The king looked at her. Petrov Kane, he said, already knows what you are. He has known, I believe, for at least 2 years. That is why his eldest daughter was being maneuvered toward this throne. Not because he loved the throne, but because he feared that someone else would sit beside me on it before his daughter did. He miscalculated. He did not believe I could find you before he did. When I walked into the Ashford ceremony last night, I believe it was the first time in his life that Petrov Kane has been afraid of me. And a frightened man does not wait. He acts. He tried to kill me tonight. No. No? He tried to take you tonight. Killing you is, and I say this with no pleasure, a last resort for him. Dead, you are no use to him. Alive, in his house, in his hands, you are worth more than the throne itself. The woman at your door was not there to murder you. She was there to put something on your skin, I think powder, possibly paste, that would have made it impossible for you to walk by yourself. And then 2 more would have come from the east corridor once the fire distracted the guards. And they would have carried you out of the palace, wrapped in that shawl, and through the laundry tunnel that comes out at the east stables, and you would have been in a cart halfway to the Kane estate before anyone in this room knew you were gone. How do you know that? Because one of the people in that plan works for me. You mean, you had someone inside the plan, and you let it happen? The king did not look away from her. I needed to know how far he was willing to go. He answered the question tonight. I am sorry for the risk I put you through, Lyra. I will not pretend I am not. But I needed to know who the body in the corridor would turn out to be. The guard. The guard was mine. He volunteered. He knew the risk. His family will be cared for. Something in Lyra's chest went tight in a way she did not have a word for. It was not anger exactly, though anger was part of it. It was something older than anger. It was the first clean look she had ever had at the shape of the man across the desk from her, and the shape was not what she had hoped it was, and not what she had feared it was either. It was a shape that used people, used them on purpose, used them with a count already made of how many it was acceptable to lose. You used him, she said. I used him. Like you're using me. Yes. Thank you for not lying about that. I told you last night I would not. You told me a lot of things last night that turned out to be partial. I'm learning what partial means, with you. He did not argue. The old man said gently, Child, there will be time to hate him later. There may not be time for what I am about to say. Then say it. Theodore opened his satchel. He took out a small bundle wrapped in gray silk, and he unwrapped it slowly, with hands that trembled a little. Inside the silk was a flat, dark stone, about the size of a woman's palm. It was the same color as the stone in the locket. In the firelight, it did not reflect. It drank. Pick it up, he said. Why? Because I need to see if it recognizes you. She picked it up. It was cold. Cold in a way that was not the cold of a thing that had been lying in a satchel. Cold in a way that was familiar. The same cold that had been living under her ribs since the ceremonial stone. The two colds, the one in the rock, the one in her chest, touched each other through her palm, and for a long, breathless second, neither one of them did anything at all. Then the stone warmed. Not much. Just enough to feel. A warmth like a body's warmth, or not quite that. The warmth of a thing that had been waiting a long time and had decided, cautiously, to be pleased. Theodore let out a long, slow breath. It knows her. Yes, said the king. Ronan, she is not a tool. I am aware of that also, Theodore. I am reminding you of it because I have watched you forget it before. I have not forgotten it this time. The old man looked at him for a long, evaluating beat, and then nodded, once, and turned back to Lyra. Child, the stone you are holding is called a listener. There are 4 of them left in the world, that I know of. This is the smallest. Your mother carried one a little larger than this one until the year she married Lyra Thorn, and then she gave it away, because she was frightened of what it would do in a house full of wolves, and that was the beginning of her dying. I do not want that to be the beginning of your dying. Do you understand me? No. Good. Keep it. Put it somewhere on your body where you can feel it when you are afraid. If it warms, you are safe. If it cools, someone near you is lying. If it goes cold enough to hurt, someone near you intends you harm. It will not save your life, child. It is not a weapon. It is only an honest friend in a house where you have none. Do you understand that much? Yes. Then we are finished for tonight. The king stood. Halwyn will take you back through a different route. Brannock will sit at your door until morning. Tomorrow, I will begin moving you toward the mountain. The mountain. There is a place, said Theodore, in the north, under the spine, where your line used to be taught. It is mostly empty now. There is one woman living there. She is almost as old as I am, which is unkind of her. She will know what to do with you. She will know more than I do, which is also unkind of her. And until I get there, until you get there, said the king, you stay alive. That's the whole instruction. That's the whole instruction. The old man was wrapping the locket back in its cloth when the alarm bell, which had been ringing for the whole of their conversation, changed. It was a small change. A person who had not been listening for it would not have heard it. But the rhythm shifted. 3 quick strokes, a pause. 3 quick strokes, a pause. And then, under it, from somewhere much closer than the east wing, a second bell began to ring. Smaller. Higher. Urgent. Halwyn at the door went still. Ronan, she said. I hear it. That's the inner court bell. I know what bell it is, Halwyn, the old man said very quietly. Oh. The king was already moving. He crossed the study in 3 strides, pulled open a drawer on the far side of the desk, took out a short, plain sword, not ceremonial, not decorated, a weapon, and he strapped the belt on without looking at his hands. Brannock. The door opened. The bald man stepped in. One look at his face told Lyra that he had heard the bell too. Your Majesty. The inner court. 20 men at least. They are in livery. Whose livery? Ours. A beat. Of course they are, said the king. He turned to Halwyn. Take her down the east stair, not the south, the east. The south is where they will expect us to go. Do you have the key for the garden door? Yes. Go to the stable, not the main stable. The old one, behind the dairy. There will be 2 horses. Brannock will meet you there. Ride north. Do not stop at any of the towns on the inner road. Theodore will take the southern route on his own, to pull them. Theodore. I am already going, said the old man, standing. His knees creaked. He bent stiffly and picked up his satchel and tucked the silk-wrapped locket inside it, and closed the satchel and looked at Lyra for what she somehow understood was the last time. Child. Yes. Listen to the stone. I will. And when you reach the mountain, he paused, as though he was choosing his words against a short clock. Do not tell the woman there everything at once. Let her ask. She is old and she is stubborn, and she will respect you more if she has to work for it. All right? Go. The king stepped in front of Lyra and took her, briefly, by both shoulders. He did not hug her. He did not kiss her. He looked at her face the way a man looks at a map he is memorizing because he is going to have to navigate it in the dark. Lyra. Yes. If I do not see you again. Don't say that. If I do not see you again, I want you to know that I meant it, tonight, when I said I was sorry. About the guard. About the way I have used you. I have spent 9 years believing that the only way to hold this throne was to treat every person near it as a piece on a board. I'm not sure anymore that that was true. I am certainly not sure it was true of you. I would like the chance to be wrong about it. Do you understand? I understand that you're telling me this because you think you might die tonight. Yes. Then don't die tonight. He almost smiled. I will try. He let go of her. Halwyn, go. They went down the east stair. Halwyn went first, with the kitchen knife in her hand, and Lyra came behind, with one hand against the wall and the other in the pocket of her dress where the listener stone now lived, wrapped in the gray silk Theodore had pressed into her palm. The stone was warm. That was the only reason she was able to put one foot in front of the other. The stone was warm, and Halwyn was ahead of her, and Halwyn was not lying. At the bottom of the stair, a door. Halwyn listened at it. Then she opened it a crack. A corridor Lyra did not recognize. Servants' corridor, plain stone, low ceiling, a single torch burning at the far end. Between them and the torch, nothing. No bodies. No sound. Now, whispered Halwyn. They moved. The corridor turned, twice, and then opened, without warning, into a small kitchen courtyard that Lyra could not have found her way back to if she had tried for a year. There were no torches here. There was a small door in the far wall, and beyond the door, Halwyn said, was a passage under the dairy that would bring them out at the old stable, and from the old stable, a road, and from the road, the north. They crossed the courtyard. Halwyn was 4 steps ahead of Lyra when the crossbow bolt took her in the shoulder. It was loud. That was the thing Lyra would remember, afterward, when she could remember anything afterward. It was loud. Not the bolt itself. The bolt made almost no sound, but Halwyn's knee hitting the cobblestone. That was loud. The knee hit, and Halwyn went sideways, and the knife skittered across the stone, and somewhere above them, on the roof of the dairy, a man's voice, low and pleased, said, There! Lyra dropped to her knees beside Halwyn. Halwyn. Halwyn, look at me. Run, girl. Halwyn. Run. The stone in Lyra's pocket had gone cold. Not warm cold, not honest cold, a cold that hurt, the way Theodore had said it would hurt. The cold of another person very close by intending her harm. She looked up. On the roof of the dairy, a figure, crossbow already reloaded, and in the doorway of the corridor behind her, 4 men in the livery of the king's house stepping into the courtyard in a loose half-circle, unhurried, the way men move when they have already won. At the front of them, in a plain dark coat, no livery at all, stood Lord Petrov Kane. He was smiling. It was a smaller smile than the one he had worn in the council chamber. It had not been prepared for anyone. It was the smile of a man alone with a thing he had been wanting for a long time. "Miss Thorn," he said, "step away from the housekeeper, please." Lyra did not move. "Miss Thorn, the housekeeper is already dying. The bolt was treated. I would rather not have to shoot you as well, but if you make me, I will put the bolt somewhere survivable. I did not come all the way down here to kill you. I came to collect you. Please stand up." Halwyn, on the ground, made a noise that was not a word. Lyra looked down at her. The housekeeper's eyes were open. There was blood at the corner of her mouth. She was trying to say something, and Lyra could not quite hear it, and she leaned closer, and Halwyn's hand, the hand that had held the knife, closed on Lyra's wrist with a grip that should not have been possible for a woman with a crossbow bolt in her shoulder. "You are not a tool, girl," whispered Halwyn. "Do you hear me? You are not a tool. You are a—" Her voice gave out. Her hand did not. Lyra looked up at Lord Kane. She stood up, very slowly. Halwyn's hand let go of her wrist only when she was fully on her feet. She could feel the woman's eyes on her, and she could feel the men in livery watching her, and she could feel the crossbowmen on the roof, and she could feel Lord Kane's smile, and under all of it, she could feel the listener's stone in her pocket gone so cold that her hip was going numb where the pocket pressed against it. The cold thing under her ribs opened its eye. She did not tell it to. "Lord Kane," she said, "Miss Thorn, you told me this morning that you wanted to set my mind at ease." "I did. I don't think you're going to." "No," said Kane softly, almost kindly. "Probably not. Step forward, please." She stepped forward, one step, just one. The cold in her chest rose up into her throat. The air in the courtyard went thin. On the ground, a thin rime of frost began to spread out from where her foot had touched the stone. A slow, pale circle, the size of a dinner plate, then a wagon wheel. One of the men in livery took a step back without realizing he'd done it. Kane's eyes narrowed. "Ah," he said, very quietly. "So it is true." "What's true?" "What Theodore has been saying for 30 years, about the Renholt line, about what you can do." "I don't know what I can do." "No, I expect you don't. That's the best part, actually. Step forward again, Miss Thorn, slowly. We're going to have a long, interesting conversation about what you can do and what you cannot, and it is going to happen in a room with walls thick enough that your king will not hear you when you scream, and it is going to happen under the hand of a very patient man named Emil, who has been waiting, to be perfectly honest, almost as long as I have. Step forward." "No," he sighed. He lifted one gloved hand, a small board gesture, and the crossbowman on the roof raised his weapon, and Lyra saw the bolt, saw where it was aimed, saw it was aimed at her left thigh, somewhere survivable, just as he had said. Somewhere in the palace above them, a door slammed open, shouting, "Boots!" Kane glanced up, briefly, annoyed. "Quickly, Miss Thorn, your king is going to come through that door in about 40 seconds. I would like to be gone before he does." "No. Last time." "No." He nodded at the crossbowman. The crossbowman fired. And Lyra Thorn, who had no wolf, who had no mate, who had spent her entire life being told she was nothing, raised one hand. Not both this time, just one, the right one. The one that was not still warm from Halwyn's grip. And the bolt stopped in the air a handbreadth from her leg and hung there, suspended, in a small, visible cloud of frost. And then it fell, slow, as though the air had thickened around it, and it clattered on the cobblestones at her feet. And it was encased in a thin shell of ice. The courtyard went silent. Kane was no longer smiling. The 4 men in livery had all taken a step back. The crossbowman on the roof was reloading with hands that had gone clumsy. From the doorway behind Kane, Lyra heard, not close enough yet, the king's voice, shouting her name. Her name. Not Miss Thorn, not Lyra Thorn of Ashford. Lyra. Lord Petrov. Kane reached, slowly, into his own coat. When his hand came out, it was holding a small curved knife. Not a fighting knife. Something older. A ceremonial thing. The kind you use in a ritual. And on the blade there was a symbol Lyra did not know, and did not need to know, because the listener's stone in her pocket had just gone so cold it burned. "Miss Thorn," said Kane, very quietly. "I did not wish to do it this way. I had hoped to take you whole, but I am told, he raised the knife. I am told by people who have studied your line that a single drop, taken warm from the heart, is sufficient for every purpose I require. So, he stepped forward. Lyra raised her other hand. The frost under her feet spread out across the whole of the courtyard in one long, crackling pulse, and the torches at the corridor mouth went out, all four of them. At the same instant, and in the dark that followed, something came up out of her, something that was not her, something that had been sleeping under the stone of the world since before the wolves, something that Theodore had told her an hour ago was not evil, only very old and very cold. And the old, cold thing looked out of her eyes at Lord Petrov Kane across the frozen cobblestones. And somewhere behind Kane, in the dark, one of the men in livery began to scream. The scream was not pain. That was the thing Lyra understood first, before she understood anything else about the next 30 seconds of her life. The man in livery was not being hurt. He was being seen. He was being seen by the thing that was looking out through her eyes, and being seen by that thing was worse than being hurt, and his body had understood it before his mind had caught up. He turned and ran. He did not reach the corridor mouth. He made it maybe 4 strides before his legs stopped working, and he went down hard on the frozen stone, clutching at his face. And the other 3 men in livery were already backing away from him, from her, from the widening pale circle of frost. And one of them, the youngest, a boy really, not much older than the groom who had taken her horse, was weeping without sound. Lord Kane had not moved. He stood where he had been standing, with the curved knife in his hand, and his face had gone a color that was not quite any color, the gray of a man whose blood has been called inward by something it recognizes and cannot fight. But he had not moved. Lyra gave him that afterward, in the part of her that was still able to give anyone anything. He was not a coward. He was only a very wrong man, and very wrong men, in her limited experience, were often brave. Miss Thorn. His voice came out steady. Miss Thorn, listen to me. She did not answer. She could not exactly. Her mouth was her mouth, but the breath going through it was not only her breath, and she was not sure yet whether if she opened her mouth she would speak, or whether something else would speak out of it. Miss Thorn, whatever is happening to you right now, you do not have to let it finish. You can stop it. I have seen your line do this before. I have read. You can stop it, Lyra, if you want to. Look at me. Look at my face. I am a man. I am an old man. I have a daughter, Miss Thorn. She is 22 years old. Her name is Sabine. She is not like her father. She has never hurt anyone. If whatever is in you now, if it goes past me, it will not stop at me. Do you understand? Petrov, the king's voice, from the corridor behind him. Kane did not turn. He did not dare take his eyes off Lyra. But his jaw moved just a little, in the way a man's jaw moves when he has just understood that he has run out of doors. Ronan, drop the knife. Ronan, listen to me. Drop the knife, Petrov. Kane did not drop the knife. The king stepped into the courtyard. There was blood on him. Lyra saw it before she saw him, really. The dark stain down the front of his coat, not his blood, or not only his, and the sword in his hand was wet, and the hand under the sword was wet, and his breathing was not the breathing of a man at rest. Behind him, in the corridor, Brannock, holding his shoulder with one hand. 2 more men she did not recognize, one with a bleeding lip, one limping. That was all. 4 men. Against, she understood, an entire plot. The king stopped when he saw her. He took in her face. He took in the frost on the stones. He took in the bolt in its shell of ice on the ground at her feet. He took in Halwyn, who was not moving anymore, who was not going to move. He took all of it in the space of maybe 2 breaths, and his face did not change, but something in the angle of his shoulders did. Something went down in him. Something went up. Lyra. She did not answer. Lyra, look at me. She looked at him. He did not flinch. She would remember that later. He did not flinch when she looked at him, though she could tell because the air between them told her that whatever was in her eyes was not quite her own eyes anymore. He looked at her the way a man looks into a fire he intends to sit beside for the rest of the night. Come back, he said. Quiet. Not a command. A request. Whatever it is you're doing, come back. I need you here. Petrov is mine. Do you hear me? Petrov is mine. Come back. The cold thing under her ribs did not like that. It did not want to come back. It had waited, Lyra understood now, a very long time to be awake. And being awake was better than being asleep, and the men on the cobblestones in front of it were the kind of men it had been made to look at. And looking at them was something like what a hungry person feels when they finally sit down at a table. It did not want to stop. But the king's voice had named her Lyra. Not Miss Thorn, not the Renholt girl, not the last of a line. Lyra. And the part of her that was still her, the part that had sat on a bench in a preparation tent in Ashford 6 hours of riding ago and counted her breaths, that part of her held on to the sound of her name the way a person caught in a current holds on to a root. She closed her eyes. She closed her eyes, and she reached not outward toward Cain, toward the men in livery, toward the frost, but inward, down into the place where the cold thing was, and she did not tell it to go back to sleep. She did not think it would have listened to that. Instead, she said, inside her own head, without words, in a shape of thought that she had never had a name for, "Not tonight, not like this. I will not use you like this." The cold thing paused. It considered her, and then slowly, with something that was almost reluctance and almost respect, it lowered its gaze. The frost did not vanish. It stayed. The cobblestones stayed white. The bolt stayed in its shell. The torches at the corridor mouth did not relight, but the pressure in the courtyard eased. The air thickened back to normal air. The man weeping on the ground stopped weeping and started breathing in great ragged gulps, and the other two in livery, the ones still standing, sank, both of them to their knees at the same time. Not because anyone had told them to, but because their legs had decided for them. Lyra opened her eyes. Lord Cain was staring at her with his mouth slightly open. He had, at some point, let the knife fall without noticing. It lay on the stones between them. "Petrov," said the king. Cain did not turn. "Petrov, step away from her." Cain stepped, one step sideways, then another. The king walked past him without looking at him, reached Lyra, stopped a pace in front of her. He did not touch her. He did not try to take her arm. He understood, somehow. And Lyra would think about this later, would think about it for a long time. He understood that a person who had just held a thing like that inside their body and put it down was not a person to be touched quickly. "Halwyn," he said quietly. "Gone," said Lyra. Her voice came out as hers. That was the first thing she checked. "A minute ago, I felt it. I'm sorry." "Me too." He nodded, once, very small. Then he turned and looked at Cain. "Brannock." Brannock limped forward. "Take him. Not to the cells, to the lower kitchen, the cold room. I want him where nobody visits and nobody sees. And Brannock, Your Majesty. Nobody goes in with him, not one man, not 2 men, not 6 men. A slot in the door for water and bread. I will speak to him in the morning and not before. Do you understand me? Your Majesty." "Take him." Brannock took him. It was not gentle. Cain did not resist. He walked, stiff-legged, past the king without looking at him, and at the mouth of the corridor he stopped briefly and turned his head back and looked at Lyra one more time, and the look was not hatred. It was something worse. It was a look of terrible, tired understanding, the look of a man who had bet his whole life on one theory of the world and had just, at 60-some years old, in a frozen courtyard, been shown that the theory was wrong. He said nothing. Brannock walked him out. The 2 other men with the king began, without being told, to gather the 3 in livery still on the ground. The crossbowman on the roof was already gone, had bolted at some point during the last minute, and nobody was hunting him tonight. And Lyra understood from the set of the king's jaw that he would be hunted tomorrow or the day after, and that it would not matter how far he ran. The king looked back at her. "Can you walk?" "I think so. Walk with me." She walked with him. They did not go back through the corridor she had come down. They went out through the small door in the far wall of the kitchen courtyard, the one Halwyn had been walking toward, and into the passage under the dairy, and Lyra walked past the place where Halwyn had fallen without looking at it, because she had learned that night that there was a kind of not looking that was a form of respect, and a kind of looking that was a form of cruelty to oneself, and she was trying, for the first time in her life, to tell the difference. At the end of the passage, the old stable. It was empty. There were no horses. Somebody had taken them. Whether Cain's men or the king's, she could not tell, and did not ask. The king stood in the middle of the empty stall for a second with his free hand in his hair, breathing, and then he said to himself more than to her, "Change of plan." "What's the new plan?" "The new plan," he said, "is that we do not leave the palace tonight." "You said I couldn't stay." "I said you couldn't stay in your rooms. I didn't say you couldn't stay in the palace. Come." He took her to a room she had not seen before. It was not grand. It was small and plain and built into the thickness of an outer wall, with one slit of a window high up that looked out toward the east, and one narrow bed against the wall, and one wooden chair, and a table with a basin on it, and nothing else. There were no tapestries. There were no silks. There was a single iron brazier, unlit. "Sit," he said. She sat on the bed. He knelt. She did not quite believe she was seeing it, at first. The king of Valecrest kneeling in front of her on the stone floor of a bare little room at what must have been 1 in the morning. He knelt, and he took her right hand, the hand that had stopped the bolt, and he turned it palm up and looked at it. Her fingertips were gray. Not black, not frost-burned, not yet, but gray, the color of a cold that had settled into skin and was thinking about staying. There was a faint pale bloom along the nail beds that Lyra had never seen before, on her hand or anyone's. "Does it hurt?" "No, it's numb." "That's worse. Theodore warned me about this." He let go of her hand and stood. "Wait here." He was back in under a minute with a stoppered clay jar and a wool shawl. The shawl he put around her shoulders without asking. The jar he uncorked and set on the table, and the smell that came out of it was sharp and green and slightly rancid, like pine pitch left in the sun too long. "Rub it into your hands, both of them, up to the elbow, all of it, if you have to." "What is it?" "An old thing. Theodore made it. It will put the warmth back. It will smell for days." "Days?" "Days. I am sorry." She rubbed it in. It stung. That was the first feeling that came back into her skin, a sharp, clean sting, like being slapped with a nettle. And then, slowly, a kind of burning, and then, slowly again, warmth. Her fingertips went from gray to pink. The pale bloom at her nail beds faded. She could feel her hands again, and she had not realized, until they came back, how much she had been afraid she had lost them. The king watched her the entire time. He did not sit. He stood with his back against the door, and his arms folded and his eyes on her face, and when she finally let her hands fall into her lap and exhaled, he said, "How much of that did you do on purpose?" "None of it." "Lyra." "I'm not lying. I didn't say you were. I'm asking you to tell me how it felt. In order. I need to understand it as well as you can make me understand it, because in about 6 hours I am going to have to explain a version of it to 40 people, and I would rather the version I explain be close to the truth." So she told him. She told him about the stone going cold in her pocket. She told him about the cold thing opening its eye. She told him about how the bolt had looked, suspended in the air. How it had not exactly been her hand that had stopped it. How it had been more like her hand had been a door that the cold thing had opened itself. She told him about the feeling of being looked through. She told him about the part where she had almost let the cold thing keep looking, and the part where she had not let it, and the word she had used inside her own head that was not a word, not tonight. He listened without interrupting. When she was done, he said, "Do you know what would have happened if you had not stopped it?" "No." Theodore believes, and I am not an expert, I am only repeating Theodore, that the old records say there are 2 kinds of Renholt women, the kind who learn to hold the cold and the kind who do not. The kind who hold it live long lives. The kind who do not burn out. The burning is not, by most accounts, a painful thing, but once they burn, they do not come back. And Cain was trying to cut you before the burning got started. A Renholt who is still cold, whose line has not, forgive the word, ignited, can be drained. The blood is useful to certain kinds of work that I am not going to describe to you tonight because you have already had a long night. A Renholt who is ignited cannot be drained. The blood changes. It is not useful to anyone except her. That is what Cain meant when he said a single drop from the heart, taken warm. He was trying to get it before you woke up. He was, as it turns out, about 3 minutes too late. 3 minutes. About that. Yes. She sat with that. That was close, she said eventually.
Yes, I might have died. You might have. Halwyn did die. Yes. I don't I don't know how to feel about that.
You will find out. Probably not tonight, probably not tomorrow, probably in a week when you are sitting somewhere quiet and somebody does something small and kind for you the way she did, and it will come up out of the floor like water. That is how it works for me. I don't know if it works that way for everyone. You've lost people. I have lost a great many people. Does it get easier? He was quiet for a beat. No, he said. It does not get easier. It gets more familiar. Those are also not the same word. She almost laughed. It was the wrong kind of laugh, a cracked small thing that was half a sob, and she stopped it as soon as it started, and he did not look away from her while she was doing it. Lyra. Yes, I have to ask you something, and I have to ask it now because in a few hours I'm going to be standing in front of the council, and I am going to need to know what my answer is when they ask it of me. Can I ask it? Yes. When you raised your hand. In the courtyard. When the bolt stopped. Every person who saw that will have told someone by morning. The three in livery are in a cell. Two of my own men saw it from the corridor. Brannock saw it. I saw it. The crossbowman on the roof saw it. And he is going to tell whoever is paying him before I can find him. By noon tomorrow, the whole palace will know that the girl I brought in from Ashford Pack is not only a girl without a wolf. She is something else. There is no version of this story where that does not come out. Do you understand me? Yes. I had planned to take you to the mountain in secret, to hide you while you learned. That plan is dead. You cannot be hidden anymore. The question is what we do instead. And I will not make that decision without you because I have made too many decisions about you without you already. So, Lyra Thorn, what do you want me to do? She looked at him. It was maybe the first time since Ashford that anyone had asked her what she wanted. She sat with it for a second, because she was not sure she had a ready answer. She had been asked so seldom that the asking itself was a thing she had to get used to before she could reach for an answer to it. What are the options? She said. Two, that I can see. One, you go to the mountain tonight, in secret, with an escort. You live there for years, quietly, and you learn. You do not come back to this palace. You do not come to court. In 20 years, if I am still alive, I may see you again. And I dismantle Kane's faction as best I can, and I keep the throne for as long as I can, and I die, probably not peacefully, some night within the next decade, and the council chooses my successor, and he is almost certainly a man Petrov Kane has been grooming since he was 8. That is option 1. And option 2. Option 2, you do not go to the mountain. You stay. You are announced formally in the morning as what I said you were, my chosen consort. You are also announced, because we cannot hide it, as something else. We do not use the word Renholt. We call it something that sounds smaller. We say you are a woman of old blood, of a line the council did not know about, and we say that any future child of this throne will carry that blood. And we invite the council to decide whether they would like to begin a war with me now over that fact, or wait and begin a war with our children later. In this option, you do not go to the mountain in secret. You send for the old woman. You bring her here. She teaches you in this palace, in the open, under guard. You are in danger every day. So am I. So is the entire throne. But the throne is standing on both of us, not only on me, and that changes the mathematics of what our enemies can afford to do. Those are my 2 choices. Those are your 2 choices. And if I go to the mountain, then you go with my blessing and my second fastest horse, and I do not know if I will see you again, and that will be my loss and not yours. And if I stay, then you are the most hunted woman in this kingdom by sundown tomorrow, and you are also, for the first time in your life, a person who cannot be overlooked. That is what you have to choose between, Lyra. Safety, which you have never had, and visibility, which you have also never had. I know which one I would choose because I have spent 9 years choosing the second. I'm not going to tell you which to choose. You're going to tell me. She did not answer right away. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed in the smelly wool shawl, with the clay jar on the table and her hand still tingling from the ointment, and she thought, for the first time in a long time, about her mother. About her mother's voice saying, "You don't tell your father, you don't tell anyone, you listen, and you keep it quiet, until you know what it is. Until you know what it is. Not forever. Until. She thought about Halwyn, who had said you are not a tool with her last breath, and who had said it as a correction, and who had died before she could finish the sentence. She thought about her father, kneeling in the dirt at the ceremony, weeping with what she had thought, at the time, was grief, and which had been, she now understood, relief. She thought about Ivy's small, sweet wave. She thought about the matron Hestia mouthing, "Be careful, child across the firelight." Ronan. If I go to the mountain and you die in 10 years and they put Cain's man on the throne, does the mountain stay safe? He looked at her. No, he said after a moment. The mountain eventually does not stay safe. If Cain's faction takes this throne, they will spend the next generation looking for you, and they will find you. I had hoped you would have 10 to 15 years of peace before that. That is the best estimate I had. It was my honest plan. But eventually they come. Eventually they come. So the mountain is not safety. It is a longer version of the same problem. He was quiet. Yes, he said. That is true. I did not want to put it that way to you because it felt cruel. But yes. Then I'm not going. He did not move. He did not react. He only, very slowly, unfolded his arms. Say it again, Lyra. I'm not going to the mountain. I'm staying. We do it your second way. I want Theodore brought back. I want the old woman sent for. I want Halwyn's family cared for, the way you said the guards would be. She stopped because she had not known she was going to say this next part until it was already in her mouth. I want my father told what happened tonight. Not a summary. The whole thing. The shawl. The knife. The courtyard. Halwyn. I want him told, in my words, in a letter I write, not in a report. And I want it known, in Ashford, that the girl he threw out of his house at the North Gate was not worthless. I want them to know that. That is not for pride. That is a thing I need done. Do you understand? I understand. Then those are my terms. Those are your terms. Yes. He looked at her for a long beat, and then he did something that surprised her. He reached out and took her hand, her right hand, the one that had been gray, and he turned it over, palm up, and he looked at it, and he said very quietly, "These are good terms, Lyra Thorn." She did not know what to say to that. "Sleep," he said. "You won't sleep much, but sleep what you can. I will come for you at dawn, and we will go into the hall together, and the world will change, and it will be a harder day than today was. Do you believe me?" "Yes." "Good." He let go of her hand. At the door he stopped. "Lyra." "Yes." "Thank you." "For what?" "For staying." He shut the door, Chad. She did not sleep. She lay on the narrow bed in the smelly shawl, and she stared at the slit of a window high up in the wall, and she watched the square of sky beyond it go from black to charcoal to a cold, milky blue. When the first bell of dawn rang, somewhere far below, she was already sitting up. When the second bell rang, she had already washed her face with water from the basin and redone her braid, and she had washed her hands a second time, with soap this time. And the smell of Theodore's ointment was only a little better, and she had taken the listener stone out of her pocket and held it against her chest for a long count of 10, and it had warmed against her skin slowly, as if it too had not slept well, and she had put it back in her pocket, and she was ready. Or she was as ready as a person could be for a thing she had never done. The king came for her with Brannock at his shoulder. Brannock had a bandage around his neck that had not been there last night. The king had changed his clothes. He was in black again, the same black as the night before, but cleaner, and there was a thin circlet of dull silver on his head that she had not seen him wear before. It was not ornate. It was small and old, and it looked more like a piece of practical equipment than a crown. "Are you frightened?" he said at the door. "Yes." "Good." They walked. The corridors of the palace were not empty this morning. They were not full either. It was too early, and the night had been too strange. But every 50 paces there was a person, and every person stopped what they were doing when the king and Lyra passed, and none of the people bowed. They stared. They did not bow. Lyra understood, walking, that word had already gone. Not just word of what had happened in the courtyard, word of her, of what she was. The servants who looked at her now looked at her the way one looks at a story one has been told since childhood, when the story suddenly sits down across the table. Not with reverence, not with fear exactly, with a wary, unsure attention, the kind you save for a guest who might be either an honor or a disaster, and who has not yet decided which. At the doors of the great hall, the king stopped. "You ready?" "No." "Say yes anyway." "Yes." "Good." He pushed the doors open. The great hall of Veilcrest could have held 400 people comfortably, and there were perhaps 160 in it this morning. The council was there, all 11 of them, the 12th chair empty, because the 12th chair belonged to Petrov Kine, and Petrov Kine was in the cold room below the kitchen, and everyone in the hall knew it. The high lords of the kingdom were there, the ones who lived close enough to have been summoned in the small hours, half a dozen matrons of the larger packs, a delegation from the Temple of the Moon, captains of the guard, pages, scribes, witnesses. They had been talking when the doors opened. They stopped when the doors opened. Lyra walked at the king's left. She had practiced this walk, standing alone in the little room at dawn, in the shawl. How to plant her feet, how to hold her chin, how not to let her left ankle favor itself the way it had done since Ivy pushed her down the stairs. She had practiced it for 3 minutes and then given up, because no amount of practice was going to make the walk not be what it was. So she walked it as herself, left ankle and all, braid slightly off center the way it had been at the ceremony. When she reached the dais, she did not look at the council. She looked straight up the hall, through the smoke of the morning braziers, at a point above the far doors, and she kept her eyes there while the king spoke. He did not speak long. "Yesterday," he said, and his voice filled the hall without effort, "I rode to Ashford Pack. I claimed a companion. I told this court that I would explain her to you this morning. I will now do so. Her name is Lyra Thorn. She is 23 years old. Her mother was Eleanor of Renholt, of a line that this court has been told, for 3 generations, was extinct. It was not extinct. It was hidden. It was hidden, in part because one faction of this council has spent 80 years hunting it, and that hunt has not been authorized by any king, including me. Last night, that faction moved against this girl inside my palace. A member of my household staff is dead. A member of my personal guard is dead. 3 of my men took wounds. Lord Petrov Kane is currently in custody. His guilt is not in dispute. It was witnessed by myself and by 4 other men whose names will be entered into the record this afternoon. He will stand before this court in 3 days' time and answer for what he has done. I invite every member of his faction, and I am not naming them now because I will name them later, at a time and place of my choosing, to consider, between now and then, whether they would like to continue in the direction they have been walking. I tell you now, and I tell the kingdom through you. Lyra Thorn is not a symbol. She is not a piece on anyone's board. She is not a tool of this throne, not mine, not yours, not her own father's. She is a woman of old blood. The old blood is awake in her. It woke, last night, in a courtyard where my housekeeper was dying, because a man with a ritual knife stood between her and the body of a woman who had protected her. I expect, in the years to come, that it will wake again, for reasons of its own. You will see it. You will speak of it. You will, some of you, try to find ways to use it. I tell you now that you will not succeed. You will not succeed because she will not permit it, and you will not succeed because I will not permit it. And between the 2 of us, there is nothing short of an army that can make either of us do what we have decided against. I have asked her to stand beside me. She has agreed. Her terms have been set, and I have accepted them. This announcement is not a request for your approval. It is a notice of fact. You may greet her as a consort, as a woman of old blood, as both or as neither, but you will greet her. He stopped. The hall was very still. Lyra felt the listener's stone in her pocket. It was warm, not cold, not even a little cold. The stone was saying, in its small, honest way, that the king had not lied. One of the matrons on the west side of the hall, an old woman with a face like a weathered post, stood, slowly, and walked out from her bench, and came to the foot of the dais, and stopped, and looked up at Lyra for a long second. And then she did something that had not been done in the great hall of Veilcrest, For 140 years. Not to anyone, not even to a king. She put her right hand flat over her left shoulder, and she bowed. It was the bow a matron gives to an elder. A second matron stood, after a beat, came forward, did the same. A third, a fourth. The delegation from the Temple of the Moon, 3 figures in pale gray, did not bow. They did something Lyra had never seen before either. They knelt. All 3 of them. Not low, not the prostration of a subject before a ruler. A knee, 1 knee each, the way you might kneel to speak to a child at eye level, if you had been a very large adult for a very long time, looking down at that child across a room. The council did not move. That too was a message. 10 of them sat, stiff-backed, in their chairs, and did not stand, and did not bow, and did not kneel. Only the younger man from the left side of the table, the one who had almost laughed at her the morning before, stood up and walked around the table and came to the foot of the dais and put his fist over his heart the way a warrior does, not the way a courtier does, and he bowed his head briefly and went back to his seat. 1 out of 11. But 1 was not 0. The king glanced sideways at Lyra. She did not smile. She did not nod. She did not move. She stood on the dais with her hands loose at her sides and her chin up, and she looked out over the hall at a point above the far doors, and she felt for the first time in her 23 years the particular silence of a room where no one was laughing at her. It was not approval. It was not love. It was not safety. It was attention. She had spent her whole life invisible. This was what being seen felt like. It was heavier than she had expected. It was not, she realized, a thing she was going to enjoy. But it was hers now, and she was not going to give it back, not to the council, not to Petrov Kane, not to her father, not to anyone. The king raised his voice one last time. This morning's business is closed. We will reconvene for the trial of Petrov Kane on the 4th day hence. Go. The hall began slowly to empty. Lyra stood on the dais beside him and watched them go. The matrons first, then the lords, then the captains. The council went last, and they went in a group, close-packed, and none of them looked at her, and that too was a message, and she received it. When the last of them was through the doors, the king let out a breath she had not realized he had been holding. Well, he said, very quietly, just to her. You're officially announced. Yes. How do you feel? She thought about it. Tired, she said. And not invisible. That's the first one. Tired is second. He almost smiled. That is going to become a very familiar order of feelings for you, he said. Tired and not invisible. Welcome to the throne. And somewhere below them, in the cold room under the kitchen, a prisoner who had not slept at all sat with his back against a stone wall and began, quietly and with great patience, to plan his next move. 3 days is not a long time to prepare for a trial. 3 days is, however, an eternity inside a stone palace where every corridor has ears. Lyra spent the first of those 3 days learning how to be the thing the king had said she was. Not the old blood. That part, Theodore told her when he came up from his southern ride a day later than anyone had expected. Saddle sore, thinner around the eyes, carrying the same satchel and what looked like a new scratch across his thumb that he would not explain, could not be taught in 3 days. It could not be taught in 3 years. What we can do in 3 days, he said, sitting opposite her on a low stool in the little room she had decided not to leave, is teach you how to stand next to it without it walking off with you. The cold has been inside you for 23 years, child. It is not going anywhere. What you have to learn is whose door it is, yours. Not its, yours. How? By practicing with a thing small enough that you can practice on it without consequences. Hold out your hand. She held out her hand. He set a cup of water on her palm. Cool the water, not ice it, cool it, halfway between how it feels now and how it would feel if I put it outside a window in winter. How? Feel the cold inside you. Lift out a thimbleful, a drop. Put it in the cup, not through your hand, through your intent. Do you understand the difference? No. Good. Try anyway. She tried. For 40 minutes. Nothing happened. Then, on the 43rd minute, a thin skin of ice crackled across the top of the water, and she jumped, and the cup tipped, and the water spilled down her wrist and soaked the cuff of her dress. Theodore laughed. It was a dry laugh, like kindling catching. "Too much," he said. "Too much. You are a big door for a small draft." Again. By the end of the day, her hands ached and the cuff of her dress was stiff with dried water, and she had managed, on the last attempt, to cool a cup from room temperature to well water cold without freezing it. Theodore had closed his eyes during that one, and when she had set the cup down, opened them and said, without smiling, "Good." "Is that good enough?" "For the trial." "No. For today?" "Yes." "Eat, sleep. Tomorrow we do it with a candle." A candle. Extinguishing a flame with cold is more careful work than chilling water. It requires you to understand where the edge of the flame is without touching it. If you touch it, you will put out the flame, yes, but you will also crack the stone of the candle holder, and the table under the candle holder, and possibly a chair. Last Renholt I trained, this was 40 years ago, child. Do not ask me her name. Cracked an entire floor on her first candle. I would rather you not. She did not crack the floor. She did not, on the second day, crack anything. She put out 4 candles in a row, cleanly, with no frost on the table around them. And Theodore nodded once and said enough for today, and left her alone with a headache that felt like a small animal trying to climb out behind her right eye. The king did not come to see her on either day. She did not ask where he was. She knew where he was, in the way one knows where a pot is when it is boiling on the stove 3 rooms away. There was a particular quality to the palace, a tightness at the edges of conversation when servants brought her meals, a watchfulness in the guards outside her door, that told her the man at the center of this building was, somewhere else in it, making decisions that were going to be very difficult to undo. She ate her meals. She did her drills with Theodore. On the night of the second day, she wrote the letter to her father. It took her 4 hours. She did not cry while she was writing it. She had thought she might. She had set the candle and the paper on the table in her little room and picked up the pen and thought, "Now is when I will cry." And she had not. She had only written. She had written the short facts first, the shawl, the knife, the courtyard, Halwen, and then she had written the longer things, the things her mother had said to her about the not a wolf, the locket that he had sold, the matron of Renholt, whose name she now knew, but which she did not use in the letter because she did not trust it on paper. And at the end of the letter, she wrote, "I do not hate you. I wanted to. I have tried. I find that I do not have the room for it. Hate takes space, and I have other uses for the space now. This is not forgiveness. I do not know if I will ever forgive you. This is only a notice. I am not coming back. Not to your house, not to your table, not to your name. If you speak of me again in Ashford, speak of me accurately. If you cannot speak of me accurately, do not speak of me at all. Your daughter, who was not what you thought she was, Lyra." She sealed the letter. She gave it to the page the king had sent. She watched him walk away with it down the corridor. She went to bed, and she slept, badly, and dreamed of Halwen telling her that she was not a tool over and over in that same cut-off voice, and she woke in the gray before dawn of the 3rd day and knew, with a strange clean certainty, that today was the day she was going to decide what kind of woman she was going to be. The trial of Petrov Kane was held in the Great Hall. It was fuller than the morning of the announcement. Every bench was taken. The balconies were lined with people who could not have been fit into the lower floor. The matrons had come in greater numbers, some of them from packs Lyra had only read about. The delegation from the Temple of the Moon was doubled, and along the west wall in a row stood the commanders of 6 packs worth of warriors, in full gear, because the king of Vilecrest did not want there to be any question, today, about who was holding the floor. Lord Kane was brought up from the cold room. He had not been tortured. Lyra could see that at a glance. His hair had been combed and his coat had been brushed, and someone, probably at the king's order, had given him a wash. He walked into the great hall between 2 guards without any show of being prodded, and when he reached the place marked for him in front of the dais, he stood and he looked up, and he did not appear afraid. He appeared, Lyra thought, tired in the particular way of a man who had not slept in 3 days because he had been thinking, not because he had been kept awake. She was on the dais. The king had asked her that morning whether she wanted a chair on the dais or a chair below it with the witnesses. She had said the dais. She had said it without thinking about it, and he had said all right, and now she was there, standing at his left, in a plain dark dress, not gray wool this time, a deeper gray that was almost black, with her hair in a single heavy braid and the listener's stone sewn into the lining of her cuff, where she could press her wrist against it without being seen to do so. The charges were read. They were long. They had been written by scribes, and they used old words for some of the things Cain had done, and Lyra, who had not had much practice with legal documents, had to concentrate to follow the list. Conspiracy against the throne, that one was clear. Hiring of men in the king's livery without the king's authority. The murder of a guard. The murder of a housekeeper. The attempted abduction of a woman under the king's protection. And at the end, a charge Lyra had not known existed in this kingdom, or any kingdom. The attempted harvest of a member of an endangered line. The council listened. They did not look at each other. That was the thing Lyra watched for most. She had been told by Theodore on the second afternoon that she should watch the faces of the 10 council members who had not stood for her the day of the announcement and see which of them looked at the others during the trial. The ones who look at each other are planning together, he had said. The ones who do not look at each other have already planned. Those are the dangerous ones. None of them looked at each other. When the charges were finished, the king said, "Petrov Cain, do you contest any of these charges?" Cain was silent for a long beat. "I do not contest the facts, Your Majesty." A small murmur through the hall. "Do you contest the interpretation?" "I contest," said Cain, "the framing, which is not the same." "Explain." Cain took a breath. He looked briefly at Lyra. It was not a hateful look. It was not even, she thought, entirely calculated. It was the look of a man who has decided to say the true thing because he has run out of use for the false ones. "Your Majesty, for 80 years the council of this kingdom has held a quiet understanding, of which you are aware, and which your father was aware of, and which your uncle was aware of. That understanding is this: the throne of Veilcrest holds its power because the Pax consent to be held. The Pax consent to be held because the throne is predictable. A throne is predictable when its holder is known, its bloodline is known, and the persons close to the throne are known. Old blood, the kind of old blood this girl carries, is not predictable. It has no pack, it has no bond, it has no counsel. It answers to no one but itself, and when it is present in a ruling house, it has historically, Your Majesty, produced rulers who do not ask permission, who do not take counsel, who do not renew the covenants with the Pax, and the Pax, in their turn, do not consent to be held. This is not theory. This is in the older records which I have read, and which I know you have also read, because I have seen the marks in the margins that only you would have made. What I did, Your Majesty, what I was doing, was not for my personal advancement. It was not for the House of Cain. It was for the preservation of a compact that has kept this kingdom in a rough peace for 4 generations. When I learned that the Renholt line had a living descendant, and that you intended to bring her into your house, I did what the council has historically done in such cases. I moved to remove the risk. I did it badly. I did it, in the final hour, with too much force and too little subtlety. Of that, Your Majesty, I am guilty. Of the deaths of your housekeeper and your guard, I am guilty. Of a miscalculation of means I am guilty, but of betrayal of the throne, no. I have not betrayed the throne. I have served, to the best of my understanding, the thing the throne is for. Boss seat. It was, Lyra thought, a good speech. That was the worst part about it. It was a good speech. It was not the speech of a monster. It was the speech of a man who had genuinely believed for a long time a particular thing about the world, and had done terrible things in service of that thing, and who was not, even now, willing to admit that the thing itself might have been wrong. The king did not answer right away. He turned his head instead to her. Lady Lyra. The whole hall turned with him. It was a small sound, 160 bodies shifting a quarter turn in their seats, but it was the loudest small sound Lyra had ever heard. Yes, Your Majesty. Lord Cain speaks of historical risk. You are the subject of that history. If you wish to answer him, you may. If you do not wish to, you need not. It was a kindness. He was giving her the option of silence. In the old protocol, Theodore had told her, the consort was supposed to stay quiet through a trial like this. It was not her place to speak. She pressed her wrist against her cuff. The listener's stone was warm. The king was not lying, and the choice he had just given her was a real one. and she could take either road, and he would not love her less for either. She took a step forward. "Lord Cain," she said. He inclined his head. "Miss Thorn, I want to answer what you said." "I would be honored to hear it," she breathed. She had not written this out. She had thought the night before about writing it out, and she had decided not to. She was going to speak from her own mouth, in her own words, whether they were good words or not. If they were not good words, she would still rather they were hers. "You said," she began, "that my line is not predictable, that the old blood answers to no one but itself. You said this as though it were a problem. I want to tell you that I don't disagree with the description. I am not predictable. I did not ask to be, and I am not sorry that I am. And I'm not going to pretend to be sorry for the sake of a peace that was built by men like you, for the comfort of men like you. You also said, and this is the part I want to answer most, that old blood has historically produced rulers who do not ask permission, who do not take counsel, who do not renew the covenants with the pacts. I don't know if that's true. I don't know the old records the way you do. I've been a woman of this line for 2 full days, Lord Cain. I haven't caught up on the reading. But I'll tell you this. I have spent 23 years being ruled by people who were predictable, very predictable. My father was predictable. My stepmother was predictable. The Pack of Ashford was predictable. I could tell you, on any given day of my childhood, what each of them was going to do to me that night, and I was right every time. Predictability is not a virtue, Lord Cain, not by itself. A cruel thing can be predictable. A corrupt thing can be predictable. A thing that rots quietly in place for 80 years without anybody asking why it is rotting, that can be the most predictable thing of all. You said you were serving the thing the throne is for. I want to ask you, what did you think the throne is for? Because I have thought about this. Over the last 3 days, I've thought about it because I didn't want to come and stand here today without knowing. And here is what I think. I think the throne is not for keeping the packs predictable. The throne is for keeping the packs alive. Those are not the same thing. When a thing is kept predictable at the cost of being kept alive, it is not being served. It is being embalmed. You have been trying to embalm this kingdom for a long time, Lord Cain. I don't hate you for it. I understand you a little. You are not the first man to mistake preservation for care. But I'm not going to let you keep doing it. Not to me. Not to him. Not to the packs. Not to children in villages where the beta tells a girl at 8 years old that she is going to be worthless for the rest of her life because her wolf did not come. Not to women like my mother, who lived 8 years in a valley that was killing her because she was afraid of what would happen if she was honest about who she was. That is what your predictability cost. That is the bill I am presenting you with today, in this hall, in front of these witnesses. You said you miscalculated your means. You did. But the real miscalculation, Lord Cain, was thinking I would be like my mother, thinking I had been raised small enough that I could be taken without breaking anything around me. I was raised small. You're right about that. But I'm not small anymore. I'm a great deal bigger than the girl you thought you were sending 3 men to collect from a courtyard, and I am going to keep getting bigger, and I'm going to keep using the room I have for things that are not hate. And the first thing I'm going to use it for is this. I do not ask for your death, Lord Cain. The hall went very still. Cain's eyes, for the first time in his speech, and hers, showed something unguarded. Surprise. Not relief. Surprise. Miss Thorn, let me finish. He closed his mouth. I do not ask for your death. I want you to live. I want you to live a long time. I want you to live long enough to see the thing you were afraid of turn out to be not what you thought it was. I want you to see a kingdom with old blood standing next to the throne that doesn't collapse. I want you to have to revise your reading, Lord Cain. I want you to sit in a cell somewhere comfortable for the rest of your life and watch us not be the disaster you were so sure we would be. And when you die, I want the last thing in your head to be the suspicion that you might have been wrong all along and that your whole life was spent preventing a thing that did not need to be prevented. That is the worst thing I can think of to do to a man like you, Lord Cain. And I am asking, as the woman whose housekeeper you killed, that you be done exactly that, and nothing worse. She stepped back. She stepped back, and her legs were shaking, but she had said it. She had said it in her own mouth, in her own words, and she had stopped shaking by the time her shoulder brushed the king's. Cain was not looking at her anymore. He was looking at the floor. The king waited for a long beat. Lord Cain. Cain raised his head. His eyes were wet. Lyra had not expected that. She did not know what to do with that information, and she decided, with some small effort, not to feel bad about it, because a man who wept at being shown mercy after he had attempted what he had attempted was not a man whose tears required her care. She filed the thought away. She would look at it again later when she was alone. "The Lady Lyra's request is granted," said the king. "Your life is spared, your lands are forfeit, your seat on this council is forfeit. Your line is barred from the council in perpetuity. Your surviving family will be permitted to keep the house in the capital and a stipend sufficient for its upkeep, provided they make no further move against this throne. You will be confined to a set of rooms on the east side of this palace for the remainder of your natural life. You will be permitted books. You will be permitted visitors, at my discretion, which will not be generous. You will be permitted paper and pen. I understand from Theodore that you have been writing a history of the council for some years. I encourage you to finish it. I will be interested in reading it when it is done." Cain did not speak for a long moment. Then, and this was the thing Lyra would remember afterward, longer than the speeches, he bowed. Not to the king, to her. It was a stiff bow, an old man's bow. It was the bow of a man for whom bowing to a woman of her age and pedigree had probably not been part of any life he had ever imagined for himself. But he did it. He did it slowly, and he held it for a second longer than protocol required, and when he straightened, he looked her in the face one more time, and he said, quietly enough that only the dais heard him, "I hope I am wrong, Miss Thorn. I do hope I am wrong." "So do I, Lord Cain." The guards took him away. Afterward, there was a reception. Lyra had not wanted a reception. The king had told her the night before that there was going to be one whether she wanted it or not, because the matrons and the lords who had come a long way were not going to be turned away without food, and food in the great hall after a trial like this was a political necessity, and therefore she was going to stand at his side for 2 hours and let the kingdom walk past her and look at her. She had said all right. She had said it in the tired voice that she was getting used to hearing come out of her mouth. For the first hour she mostly stood. Matrons came and bowed and said small things and went. The young lord from the council, his name, she learned, was Corwin Vance, came and said very earnestly that his mother had been a distant cousin of a Renholt, and that he had been raised on stories, and that if there was ever anything he could do, he hoped she would. She thanked him. She had already privately decided that he was not going to be a problem and that he might, in a year or two, be useful, and she filed the thought away without feeling bad about having had it, which was something else she was getting used to. And then, near the end of the hour, the crowd parted, and a figure stepped out of it that Lyra had not, for a second, expected to see. The matron of Ashford, Hestia. She was smaller than Lyra remembered, or perhaps it was that the matron had always been this small, and Lyra had been, herself, smaller, and the proportions had felt different then. The matron was in her gray robes. Her feet, Lyra noticed, were in shoes for once, probably because the stone floor of Valecrest was colder than the stone of Ashford's ceremonial ground. Hestia stopped 3 paces from the dais. She looked up. For a long moment neither of them said anything. Then the matron did what she had done on the ceremonial grounds, that first night. She knelt, slowly, carefully, on her bad knee. She knelt, and she bent her head, not to the king, but to Lyra, and she stayed there. "Hestia, child, stand up, please. I would like to say something first while I am on the floor. Say it standing. It means less, standing. It means too much on the floor. Stand up." A long pause, then a small dry laugh from the old matron. The same kind of dry laugh Theodore had laughed over the cup of water, and Lyra wondered, briefly, if all old people who knew things laughed that way, or whether it was something they were taught. Hestia stood, slowly. Her knees, when she rose, made a sound that Lyra felt more than heard. "I wronged you," said the matron. Lyra did not answer. "On the night of the ceremony, when you closed your eyes in the circle, I felt something that was not a wolf. I have never felt anything like it before in 50 years of this work. I knew, in that moment, that you were something my order did not have the words for, and I did what a frightened woman does when she meets a thing she does not have words for. I called it silence, and I told you to step aside, and I sent you to the north gate. I should have stopped the ceremony. I should have taken you inside. And I should have sent a bird the same night to every order of old women between here and the sea, asking who knew what to do with a girl like you. Instead, I let your father speak to you the way he did. I let the pack laugh. I let Ivy say what she said. I did not protect you, child. I was the one person in that valley who knew enough to have protected you, and I did not. And I am not going to ask your forgiveness. I am not owed forgiveness. I am only going to tell you, in this hall, in front of these witnesses, that I was wrong, and that I am sorry, and that if you want me to walk back out of this palace tonight and never set foot in another ceremonial ground as long as I live, I will do it, and I will not argue. The hall, which had been pretending not to listen, was listening. Lyra looked at the old woman. She thought briefly of saying a hard thing. She could have. There were hard things ready in her mouth. But she thought of her mother's voice again. Well, until you know what it is. And she thought of what she had said to Cain about how hate took space, and she had other uses for the space. And she understood that the words she said to Hestia now were not really about Hestia. They were about what kind of woman Lyra was going to be from this day forward, generous or not, cruel or not. The matron was only the first test of that question. There would be others. Hestia, child, don't stop doing the work. Do it differently. The next girl who closes her eyes in your circle and finds something that isn't a wolf, you send the birds. You sit her down. You tell her what you know. You do not send her to the north gate. Do you hear me? I hear you. That's what I want, not your retirement, your correction. Go home. Do it better. That is all I ask. The matron bowed one more time and stepped back into the crowd and was gone. And it was there, at that moment, with the old woman walking away and the hall humming back to life around her and the king's hand resting, briefly, lightly, at the small of her back. Not a claim, not a show, just a touch. The touch of a man who was there and wanted her to know he was there. That Lyra Thorn understood, clearly and for the first time, that the thing she had been afraid would happen at the ceremonial ground had not happened at all. She had not been rejected by fate. She had been released by it. The version of her that had walked toward the north gate in Ashford in a dress with a half-undone braid had been a version that had a wolf-shaped future waiting, and the future had come, and the future had opened its hands, and the future had said no, not that. Something else. And the something else was harder. And the something else was colder. And the something else did not love her the way a wolf would have loved her. But the something else had not lied to her, not once, in 3 days. And nothing in her life before had been honest with her at all. That night the king came to her rooms. She had been moved. Her new rooms were larger than the first ones had been, and they had windows that actually opened, and there was a desk by one of the windows that she had, within an hour of arriving, begun to cover in papers. Theodore's old exercises in his cramped handwriting, letters from matrons she had not met, come by bird that afternoon already. A list, in her own hand, of names, people to thank, people to watch, people to pay. She was 23 years old. 3 days ago she had been nothing. She was already, she could see, going to be very busy. The king knocked. He did not come in without knocking. Come in. He came in. He was out of the coat. He was in a plain shirt and trousers, and his hair was damp, and he had, she could tell, slept for at least an hour, because the line between his eyes was softer than she had ever seen it. You're still awake. I have work. You are going to have work for the rest of your life, Lyra. Some of it will keep until tomorrow. All right. She set the pen down. He sat in the chair opposite her. He did not say anything for a long moment. She did not fill the silence, because she was getting better at not filling silences. Theodore had praised her earlier in the evening for that. You are learning to let other people be uncomfortable, child. This is one of the harder skills. Well done. I have something to ask you, said the king. All right. Not tonight, not tomorrow, in a year, maybe 2. All right. I asked you 3 days ago to stand beside me as a chosen consort. That was a political arrangement. It was not. I was very clear about what it was and was not. I want to ask you something else, not instead of, in addition to, when you are ready, not before. Ronan. Yes. Are you asking me something now or telling me you will ask me something later.
Telling you I will ask you something later. Then wait until later. He almost smiled.
All right, I will think about it when you ask, not before. Is that fair?
That is fair.
I want to tell you something too.
Tell me.
She folded her hands on the desk. She did not look at him. She looked out the window at the dark shape of the palace walls and the sky above them, which was, for the first time in days, clear and full of stars she had not been in a position to look at since she had left Ashford. I am not going to be a kind queen, she said. No, I'm going to try to be a fair one. I'm going to try very hard not to be cruel. I'm going to try to remember that I was small once, and that a great many things were done to me by people who had decided I did not matter. And I'm going to try not to do those things back, because doing them back is how you make more people like the ones who did them to you, and the world does not need more of those people. But I am not going to be kind, Ronan. I don't think I know how to be kind anymore. I lost that somewhere between the north gate and the courtyard, and I am not going to lie to you and say I can get it back, because I do not think I can. I want you to know that now, before we go any further.
He was quiet. Lyra. Yes. I am not a kind king either. I know. I think it will be all right. I hope so. The people who need kindness, we can hire those people. There are kind people in this kingdom, Lyra. Plenty. They do not all need to be us. What we need to be, you and I, is the people who make sure the kind people have somewhere safe to stand. That is a different job. I think we might be good at it. She looked at him. That's a better way of putting it than I had, she said. That is the one thing I am better at than you, putting things in order. Everything else, I expect you will be better at within a year. That's probably true. I know. She laughed. It was the first real laugh she had laughed since she had walked into a preparation tent in Ashford with a half-done braid. It was short and a little cracked, and it surprised her as much as it surprised him, and when it was over she put her hand up to her face because her eyes had gone wet without her asking them to. He did not come around the desk. He did not reach for her. He sat where he was, and he let her have the moment, and when she was finished, he said very quietly, "Go to sleep, Lyra. The work will be here tomorrow. It will be here for years. You do not have to finish it tonight." "All right. Good night. Good night, Ronan." He left. She went to the window after he was gone and stood there for a long time. She did not cry in the way she had expected, all those days ago in the preparation tent, that she might cry when her life was finally her own. It turned out that when her life was finally her own, she did not cry over it. She looked at it. She took stock of it. She put her hand in the pocket of her dress and touched the listener's stone, which was warm, the way it was warm when the room was honest. She thought about her mother. She thought about Halwyn. She thought about the guard whose name she still did not know, whom she would make it her business to learn tomorrow and to write to his family herself, not with the king's seal, with her own hand. She thought about the girl she would have been if she had stayed in Ashford, if she had walked out the north gate and kept walking into the tree line the way her father had ordered, and whether that girl would have found her way somehow to a life. She did not know. She hoped so. She hoped the world had other ways, for other girls, that did not require a stranger on horseback to come down off a ridge at the last possible moment. She suspected it did. She suspected that most girls who were told they were nothing did not get a night like hers, and that most of them had to become themselves anyway, in smaller rooms with less help, and she understood standing at the window. That part of the work of the life she was about to live was going to be about making that easier for them, not chosen by fate, chosen by themselves. That was the sentence she kept coming back to, and it kept meaning more each time she came back to it. A wind came up outside the window. It was cold, but it was only the ordinary cold of a clear night in a northern capital in early spring, and the cold thing under her ribs stirred and considered the ordinary cold, and did not rise to meet it because there was no threat in it. It had learned, even in 3 days, to tell the difference. So had she. The stars were very bright. She watched them for a while longer. Then she went to bed, and she slept, and she did not dream. And in the morning, the girl who had once been Lyra Thorn of Ashford, the failure, the rejected, the one the pack had laughed out of the ceremonial ground in a stained white dress with a half-done braid, got up and put on a darker dress, and pinned her hair the way she liked it, and went to work. Because there was work to do,
And she was, for the first time in her life, the one who got to decide what it was and how it would be done. And to whom? Not chosen by fate, forged by her own hand. And no one, from that morning forward, was ever going to overlook her again.